Bastard! Your false king's friends are dead. Their heads upon the walls of Winterfell. Come see them, bastard.
Welcome to Maester Monthly, your favorite pseudo-monthly podcast hosted by the moderators of the Song of Ice and Fire subreddit. This podcast is spoilers extended. That means there are spoilers for all the episodes of Game of Thrones and all the published chapters of A Song of Ice and Fire, including the Winds of Winter sample chapters.
Abandon all hope, ye who enter here.
My name is Michael, also known as Bookshelf Stud.
My name is Eliana, also known as Glass Staple Girl.
And my name is Matt, also known as Joe Magician.
My name is Aaron, also known as Admiral Curd.
Today we are also joined by another one of our fellow moderators.
Hi everybody, I'm Sir Dunk the Lunk, Alex.
Yay! Who are you?
Let's see, I had the Lady Dustin pink letter theory. I had the whole Ajora Ahai thing. A few other kind of crackpot theories here and there over the last few years.
I also have a great story about both Alex and Jeff at Ice and FireCon. So, at Ice and FireCon 2017, a couple of us attended, and Jeff, Alex, and I all shared a room. Jeff, aka Brendan Beefish, for those of you who aren't like on a first name basis with all of us for some reason. Anyway, so we thought we could have 3 sleeping areas. We thought the room was going to be big enough for an inflatable mattress, but it wasn't. So Jeff and Alex shared a bed. How was that? Tell us how that was, Alex.
It was everything that I thought it would be and more. It was wonderful.
I hear it was very, it was full of cuddles. I'm going to just slander all of my co-hosts and talk about how both Alex and Jeff are terrible, snorers. They are so loud.
It's not true. It's not true. Lies.
It's sort of a fun fact about.
I do not snore.
No, they both snore very loudly. But the nice thing is when they're both in the room, right? There's a constant snoring, so it's like a white noise. It's the same level of noise.
like
so
a white noise machine.
Yeah. So you can, but very loud. But you can block it out if both of them are always on. So as opposed to intermittent. And apparently one of the 2 nights, or one of the 2 or 3 nights, one of them turned to the other and was like, "Dude, you snore," because they couldn't sleep through it. And the other responds, "No, dude, you snore." And I thankfully slept through this. But my response is obviously, "You both snore."
Is this all true?
This is actually all true.
Yeah,
I heard
to the best of my recollection, yeah.
Did you guys sleep facing each other, facing the same way, or butts together?
Staring into each other's eyes, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
You get sleep with your eyes open?
Yeah.
They're both sort of like Gandalf, I assume.
My best friend does that. It creeps me out.
Oh, that's very creepy. Yeah. No offense.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, no, that's my intro for Alex.
Amazing.
Also, me and Alex tied for the best new theory, and we still have yet to fight to the death for the actual title of that.
That's true.
Yeah, that's going to be a dark day, but it's going to have to happen.
I mean, I hope I win, but best of luck in our battle to the death.
Was that the 2015 awards?
We got the exact same vote totals.
We'll get to that one. Yeah,
one day.
If he's Sir Dunk the Lunk, Matt, are you Aryan Brightflame in this situation?
No, I think he's Orys Baratheon in their eventual trial by combat.
I feel like the Laughing Storm. That feels more me.
Okay, I can see it. I can see it.
So today we have some great subreddit highlights to get to, some good posts from the beginning of 2018, and then after that we will get into a deep dive discussion on the pink letter and theories surrounding it. But before we get to all that, Eliana, I believe you had a question for us.
Oh, Yes. So one of the great things about the world of Ice and Fire, there's so much world building, and there are, as well as all these different characters, there's a lot of different creatures in George R. R. Martin's world. So my question to all of you is, what is your favorite creature? Real, imagined, mythological, etc. In George's world. Humans don't count.
Okay, all right.
Mine would be the butterflies of Noth.
Oh.
I think that there is something completely terrifying about something so beautiful that is changed into wanting to murder you.
Totally, yeah.
Wait.
Oof.
Whoa. Hold on. That got real deep, and that made me think about the way the others are described in the books. What do you think about that, Aaron?
I like it because it reminds me of Lucifer.
Oh.
Like beautiful, yeah.
Yeah, like Satan's supposed to, in Christian whatever, is supposed to be actually like a fallen angel, so he isn't actually a demon. He's supposed to look like beautiful, but he also like is a horrible... I mean, he's the devil. He doesn't have horns. Yeah, I think it's a better story that way.
Yeah.
Do you think the others are waiting to become butterflies? Like they're gonna just burst out?
Like they're
cocoons? These are their cocoons?
Maybe they're not ice spiders, they're ice butterflies.
Oh. Yeah. Maybe ice spiders are like their larval stage, and then the others are their pupal stage, and then they become butterflies who migrate
or
to
ice
Noth.
Dragons? Mind blown.
Whoa. Now, do you think, I mean, some people have suggested that the butterflies like carry a tiny disease or so, like microbes live on them or something. Do you think it's that, or do you think they're like magic butterflies that kill people?
I have no freaking idea. I just like the concept.
That's fair. Okay.
I think it's magic.
You think it's magic? I think that's more likely. If I had to answer, and I hope I'm not stealing anyone's here because it's a good one, possibly the best one, I'd have to go with the Squishers.
Oh, the Squishers!
They're like good boogeymen. They're classic, sort of backwoods, creepy monster alien things. I don't know. They seem like something out of one of those weird cryptozoology books you find in the public library.
They seem like the Mothmen of Westeros.
Yes, the Mothmen of Westeros.
And they squish everywhere.
Yeah.
Squish, squish, squish.
Very creepy. My dad used to sing to me a different verse of The Wheels on the Bus, which went, "The monkeys on the bus go squish, squish, squish." So that's what I always think of.
What?
What?
Why would they squish?
That was never
What's
explained.
squishing?
There was a lot of ambiguity in my dad's songs.
Are you okay?
I haven't really investigated that too much, really. I haven't self-reflected on that song.
Maybe it comes from your dad's childhood.
Oh, maybe he met a squisher.
What if your dad is a squisher and we're the monkeys?
Damn, dude.
Oh my god.
Aren't we all squisher monkeys when you really get down to it?
I feel like the Squishers are the ones that remind me of the Japanese, like, kappa?
Oh, yeah.
Right? Monsters?
Yeah.
Oh, good call, yeah. Yeah, because they're like these...
They're like water goblins,
webbed
right?
foot monster. Yeah, water goblins,
Yeah.
exactly.
And they, like, steal people.
All right, so for my favorite mythological creature from A Song of Ice and Fire, it would be the Sphinxes. It's unclear if they were real or not, but the Valyrians really love them. There's statues to them everywhere. I just like the idea of just like people in the Age of Heroes were walking around and there's just constantly Sphinxes with riddles. It's like, oh, come on, man. I'm just trying to like walk home. Enough with the riddles.
Apparently there's a Valyrian Sphinx.
Yes.
Which, like, people heads and Dargan bodies.
And that's the other reason I actually like them, because that seems to imply that the dragons and the humans are somehow merged. The Valyrian Sphinx is like a symbol of the Dragon Lords. Sort of what's going on there. They're kind of cool. Like if you imagine Bran warging a direwolf, it would be like his head on top of the body. So maybe
that
it's like
is how I'm going to imagine it from now on.
Wait, we should have that picture.
Yeah. Bran's head on a direwolf.
Yeah.
Well, that's what Melisandre sees, except it's a wolf head on a boy's body or something.
That's more intimidating than a little boy's head on a big wolf's body.
Well, that's what it is. He's taking over their brain. It'd be like Hodor when he's being warred. It's just like Bran's tiny head on top of his body.
So he looks like one of the Goombas from Super Mario Brothers movie, which makes another appearance on the modcast.
Finally, more Super Mario Brothers.
It's not a coincidence that Bran is one letter away from brain. Also, I guess that's kind of, it's like the reverse Rob. The reverse dead Rob Stark.
Oh, yeah. Boar.
What?
What did you say?
That's Rob backwards. Boar. So, Alex, what's your, if you had to pick one, mythical?
The raptors, obviously.
Oh yeah, those are a good ones.
There's literal raptors in the world that they get like a little one-off mention and then they're never talked about. But that's terrifying. Right?
Absolutely, yeah.
There's the whole idea that like the southern continent hasn't been colonized successfully because of disease or whatever. No, it's the raptors. They just eat everybody.
It's the raptors. Yeah.
Going back to the Super Mario movie, maybe Sartorius.
It all comes back to
Is Super Mario Brothers the movie?
Yeah, well, because
that's
remember...
where the land, it's a universe where the meteor never hit, right? And the dinosaurs are still alive. Or they survived it?
Yeah,
or something?
They survive and like evolve to become like human-like intelligence, but scaly.
Yes.
And what they are.
So, Eliana, what's your animal that you would pick, your creature?
Okay, mine, because I'm just still so intrigued about what do they mean when they say Zorses? Like, is the Zorse a hybrid between a horse and a zebra? Is Zorse actually just their term for actual zebras? Can you ride on a zebra? Is it a different thing entirely? Is it just a stripy horse? I don't know. Zorses. Lots of questions.
I think it's just zebras, because like they have that mention of striped horses in the Sea Lord's Menagerie. So like, I don't know, they don't seem to have like the word zebra. So
I'm gonna drop some wiki knowledge into the cast here, where apparently in the world of Ice and Fire, as we all remember, the Jogos Nahai created the Zorses by breeding horses with, like, basically actual zebras. Oh, I don't think they use the word zebras.
Well, zebras.
Zorse. Oh, yeah, they call them zebras because the Jogos Nahai have British accents. But a Zorse is like a real thing too. It's a real. It's like an ass. It's just
an ass. You don't have to be mean about it.
A donkey, a mule.
Yeah, it is like a mule. So
yeah.
I hope that's not like a cop-out then for me to say Zorse. I mean, like, I know that they like made it in real life, but I mean, dinosaurs existed in real life too, and...
They still exist.
As birds.
Yeah, that's true, as little birds. Little
linguistically,
dinosaurs.
It's interesting, like, why do they have the word Zorse if they didn't have the word zebra?
These are questions that I have.
Maybe in the language of the Jogos Nahai, the letter H is actually pronounced as a voiced alveolar fricative, which would be a Z.
Yeah.
So that could
That's
be,
good.
you know.
Maybe.
Post that.
Just throwing it out there.
The new theory post, Zorses.
Well, I think that brings us to our subreddit highlights for the month. So, Aaron, do you want to get us started?
No, but I will. This is a post by Starfall University, who says... A 1996 review of A Game of Thrones. Be prepared for a lengthy series with an indefinitely deferred conclusion. It's a short little snippet that comes from a review where somebody who seems familiar with George R. R. Martin's previous work, the Armageddon Rag, and some other stuff in there, and seems to go through an entire spoilerific review, so hopefully nobody read this review, that was interested in the series. Because it's a bad review. But still, he says, after 672 dense pages, were you expecting a satisfying resolution? You won't get it. Be prepared for a lengthy series with an indefinitely deferred conclusion.
Oof.
And this was written back in 1996. Starfall University says that's an awful lot of prescience.
Prescience.
Easy golem.
My prescience.
Thank you. There we go. That's way better.
Thank you.
That's an awful lot of prescience when the series was still planned for 3 or 4 books.
Prescience.
So yeah, what do you guys think about this review on the post that Starfall brings us?
Sounds like an Avalon fan to me.
Yeah. Was this Sam? Sam wrote this.
Yeah, I think fellow moderator Sam did.
I don't think he was born yet, was he?
He was like 2 years old. I mean, I always think things like this are so interesting because Game of Thrones and Song of Ice and Fire are really big nowadays, and it's not hard to find reviews and theories and all sorts of content, obviously. But finding things from back in 1996 that were written about the series is a little harder. So it's really cool to see what people thought about it back in the day. And I mean, I feel like the review is positive. I mean, they call it a vast, rich saga with splendid characters, intricate plot, but they also definitely called it like they saw it.
Yeah.
Because there's no way you can wrap up the promises of the first book in another couple years or anything.
True. When you look at the prologue especially, they drop in the others, they show this incredible fantasy stuff, and then it never comes back for the rest of the book. They only talk about it, I think, during the next chapter, and that's about it. When you're looking at the fact that, like, this is the real plot, and then George goes off and tells this historical, noble story, how can you expect he's going to finish it quickly? He has dropped the main plot for the rest of the book entirely.
Well, there's some good comments in here from Adam Whitehead, aka Wurthead of the Wurt Zone, who I think we've talked about before, who's been around in fantasy fandom for a long time. And he points out that in his comment, he says this was just as the cynicism over Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time was kicking in. And he says he remembers a lot of surprise that the series had hit 7 volumes and wasn't over. And people started predicting it would be a ridiculous number of books in length. And so, yeah, like in that context, when you read a Game of Thrones, you're like, oh my God, it's another Robert Jordan. How are we going to deal with this?
Yeah.
There's also something to bear in mind with when people like seem to predict the future. There are some people who are going to be like the statistical outliers who get it right way more often than they actually should. And so when we look at things like somebody guessing something like this in the past, it's not always, I don't know what I'm trying to say.
No, I get what you're saying.
Okay.
They may not have good reason for what they're saying, but they did get it right. Not everybody.
Yes.
There is such thing as random, as just luck and getting it correct.
Right.
Thank you, Boo.
You're welcome, Boo. Another thing, it's that you pointed out that this author the reviewer seems to be familiar with his work. I mean, before Song of Ice and Fire, George has a long history of not finishing series. It took him forever to finish the Tough Voyaging short stories. He never finished. He started Avalon and just sort of gave it up. He does like all these like very small stories that he's like, I'm good, and moves on to another thing. There's actually an anecdote that he was in the middle of writing Avalon, and then the scene with Bran came, and he's like, I'm done with that. I'm going to go write fantasy now.
Yeah, much to our, undying sorrow. Yeah.
I mean, I know that, like, the short stories Sand Kings, Shade, and Woe, 2 of the salespeople and stuff, the merchants there, were supposed to be their own series, and that didn't happen. So, I don't know.
One of the other things this post, or a lot of people in the comments are bringing up, is that this review, it's about a paragraph long, and the paragraph completely summarizes and spoils the whole book, right? Do you think we're going to see reviews like this for The Winds of Winter when it comes, or are people going to be way more circumspect about spoiling it? What do you think?
I think if something's so popular like The Winds of Winter, it's not going to be spoiled in the reviews. I think some people will let little things slip out here and there. But for a series that big and so conscious that people will be picking it up, they won't spoil the medium. But if it's like this an obscure book, which is what a Game of Thrones was at the time, not like George is well known in fantasy, but still, it's not like it was going to be the super hit that it is now, and guaranteed that a whole bunch of people will read it.
Well, I think there definitely will be a few people that write reviews like this just to be like, there's no such thing as bad publicity. They'll be the ones that write the spoiler review, and people will go there to read it and get angry at them.
I think there'll be like somewhere like of a middle ground, like, right? I mean, this happens with television shows. In the way the world is set up now, people don't watch shows right as they come out. They may defer for a day or two, but the review will be out. So, like, they'll give maybe their high-level ideas and thoughts on how successful they think that the story was, but then there'll be, like, a page break, and you can click to see the rest of it, or it'll just warn you that, hey, there's going to be spoilers in this review, and I think that's fine. I'm just, like, letting the reader choose for themselves the amount of information that they want to read, but still having a more comprehensive amount if they think it's necessary for what they're doing.
Yeah, it's fascinating, like, how that's changed since 1996. Like, you wouldn't see that level of nuance in keeping people not too spoiled for a book review or anything. Like, that's so different. And obviously, A Song of Ice and Fire is totally an exception. I think most book reviews probably still read like this. Because, of course, you got to summarize the plot. People need to know what you're talking about.
There's a really interesting debate about whether or not this has kind of changed over time in the comments of this particular post.
Mm-hmm.
I think it has. If you guys ever go back and you look at like movie trailers from the 90s, I mean, they give away the entire plot.
Yeah.
Like it's basically the movie cut down to like 3 minutes, and it's the whole, every development is there. The culture around spoilers and audience expectations and reader expectations in the case of books has changed over time.
Mm-hmm. Totally, yeah. And there's a good example in the comments too, where they're talking about Star Wars and how the Star Wars novelizations came out like months before the movies did. So you could go out and buy a book and be like, "Oh shoot, Obi-Wan dies," before 6 months before the movie comes out.
And also for this review, it's important to point out this was a print review. This was in a magazine made by Spectra and Bantam. So this was for people that are trying to find new book series, from like hyper nerds that are really looking for new ones. So it's not like they posted this on Twitter or they posted it on YouTube and it got like the top thing. Like very few people read this, and it was for people that don't care.
Yeah. I mean,
That's
like,
true, yeah.
I had to call into the internet at this time. Like, I mean, it would have taken me like probably 10 minutes to even load this review, assuming it was ever published online.
Yeah.
One of the other things I thought was interesting with this, did they even mention the others at all?
No.
In this review?
I don't think so.
There are reviews, or not even just reviews, but like synopses that do mention the others. I've seen before. Like, even like on the backs of books, like how the back of books will be like, this is what's happening.
Yeah, but it's funny, like, the only mention in this review is Ned Stark returned north to gloomy Winterfell with its massive ancient wall farther to the north that keeps wildlings and unspeakable creatures from invading. And that's it. And then the rest of it's the summary of like the Lannister plot.
Well, it's not untrue of the way the first book is structured. Like,
totally.
Brendan B. Fish and Poor Quentin talk about in their podcast of the first Bran chapter, that like the prologue is about the others, but for the rest of the entirety of A Game of Thrones, like we never even come back to that. The whole book is more or less about the politicking between all the different factions of the Seven Kingdoms.
Absolutely, yeah. Politic talk on the clock.
Tick.
Is that a phrase?
Yeah, from the great author Kesha.
I want to read her fantasy series. It'd be amazing.
Poet laureate. Yeah. Well, I had a post that I wanted to bring to y'all's attention. This is something by sssuperstark. That's sssuperstark. The post is titled "Something Interesting I Noted in Sansa's First Chapter." And this post lays out how Sansa, despite her terror interacting with Sir Ilan Payne and her nervousness around Joffrey, is able to speak quickly, smoothly. She sort of eases ruffled feathers and is able to identify people solely by their sigils and the helmets they wear, and just displays this breadth of poise and knowledge that, when contrasted with maybe her other siblings, seems even more impressive. I like this post because it's something that I think we overlook as readers who know everything and have met some of these characters before Sansa meets them, so we know who they are. Sansa is really sort of more well-prepared than people think she is, and better at concealing her own nervousness than people think she is, almost like Sam. What did you guys think of this post?
It reminds me a lot of like what Isabel said in our Women's of Westeros episode, where she was talking about like, hey, Sansa and a lot of these women have been raised to understand the houses and the heraldry and who all these people are, because they're going to have to know that, and they have to, in their society, find a mate. That's partially on them to learn and to be able to do things around help run the kingdom and know who people are and understand the social circles.
Yeah.
And a lot of that's due to Catelyn's tutelage and also Septa Mordain.
Probably, yeah.
Rest in peace.
But actually, though, she wasn't the best teacher. She wasn't the worst. But yeah, what's interesting is like in the rest of this passage, Sansa is doing, as you said, like what a lady is supposed to do in sort of controlling that situation, and mediating all of the different tensions in the room. And this comes back to like that line that is often repeated in A Song of Ice and Fire that Sansa was taught by Septa Mordain: courtesy is a lady's armor.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's like a misunderstanding just because of the way language evolves that courtesy solely means being nice and so forth. But if you look at the rest of this passage, Sansa thinks to herself when she's like identifying other people and meets Barristan and Selmy, she's like, Sansa knew the name, and now the courtesies that Septim Mordain had taught her over the years came back to her, the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. So courtesies is also like just that, knowing your way around courtesies.
Yeah.
So she shows a really deft wielding of that by being able to use it in this situation and identify Renly and Barristan.
Mediating, like you said, I think, right? Like, she's sort of standing at the nexus of all these dudes and being like, oh, you know, Sir Lin Payne, he's appropriately scary, Your Grace, right? And, like, that's, you know, everyone think that's funny, that keeps the tension low and all that. She's really good at playing the room like that. And I think some people in the comments have some other examples from later in the books where she does similar things or keeps her actual emotions hidden.
She spends a lot of these books, especially while she's in King's Landing, just sort of like dodging swords, but they're unseen ones. Everyone's like trying to get a piece of her. Everyone's trying to use her for their advantage, and Sansa just keeps like dancing away from them, moving things to her advantage and staying alive in a situation where she probably would have been killed by Joffrey a lot earlier.
Yeah, I mean,
because he's so impulsive. He kills Eddard, even though that's a bad move.
Yeah.
The fact that she survived when he didn't is pretty impressive.
She still didn't make it out great through no fault of her own, like with Joffrey being the kind of person who thinks it's okay to beat your betrothed.
Yeah.
But she could have ended up in like something like a Lady Hornwood situation, you know, that...
Or the Maiden Vault.
Yeah.
I also am looking back at this post, and I think it's Barristan. It says, well-spoken child, said the old man in white, as befits the daughter of Eddard Stark. Eddard is actually, even though he fails in King's Landing, he's an exceptional political manipulator up in the north. The way he goes around to each of the houses, the way he keeps them all in line. Yeah. And actually we learned that Jon has absorbed that. He knows like Alice Karstark at a glance. He knows exactly how to manipulate the mountain clans.
Right.
He keeps the Boltons mostly in check. He does a great job, and so does Jon in the north. And it seems like Sansa is being a true daughter of Eddard Stark in that way. It's just that she knows the southern houses in a way that Eddard does not.
I think that's probably true, yeah. That actually, I'm glad you said that, because sssuperstark had
That's a good name.
Great comment, really deep in the comments, that deserves to be its own post, honestly. It has its own TLDR, where they assert that Arya and Catelyn are most similar, and Eddard and Sansa are most similar. That's how they should be paired off. And that there's a reason so many people think Lady Stoneheart will meet Arya. There's a reason Arya in the show seems to have taken over Lady Stoneheart's role. That those two characters are similar. And then Eddard and Sansa are a little more similar because of, you know, how they deal with people around them. They're a little more passive, whereas Catelyn, she's kind of like Arya, right? She's very fiery. She speaks her mind. She berates Stannis and Renly for, you know, squabbling like little boys. Whereas I don't see Ned or Sansa treating that situation the same way. So I thought that was a really interesting point, because I feel like most people rightly so, compare Sansa to Cat, because Littlefinger does that in the books, and we're told how much they look alike.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, and I think that you start to see the similarities between father and daughter come to light later in the books. Like, a lot of the language of both Eddard's chapter in the dungeons is similar to the language of Sansa's last chapter in A Game of Thrones. And I've seen people talk about that before, and I think you can see how Sansa absorbs also Ned's approach to politics, like in A Clash of Kings, during the Battle of the Blackwater. Cersei, because she's absorbed her own father's way of politicking, she thinks that one's subjects ought to fear her, and Sansa internally thinks, I wouldn't make my subjects fear me, I would make them love me. Mm-hmm. And as Matt was just pointing out, you know, that's the approach that Ned took. He, like, visited the northern clans, etc. So Sansa also really took that lesson to heart.
Yeah, especially comparing it to Cersei's own internalization of her dad's terrible, terrible politics.
The whole, you know, arc of Sansa through the books here, and how we see her become more and more like Eddard as the series progresses, is about kind of peeling away these weird layers of social conditioning that she is totally steeped in that first book. But even then, you see these little flashes of her instincts coming through, like in these two passages that are highlighted.
Absolutely, yeah. You can almost compare her to Sam, because Sam. I think people make the mistake. Samsa. People make the mistake
That's a ship.
Thinking that Sansa is.
Let's not.
Yeah, Coast Guard. We need the Coast Guard.
I'm sure it exists somewhere.
I think people make the mistake of taking Sansa at her own word about herself, believing when she thinks to herself, "Oh, I'm just a stupid child. I'm such a idiot." But like Sam, she's not only internalized all these good things from Ned. She's been abused by Cersei and Joffrey and Littlefinger later on in different ways. And so I think part of it as a reader is getting past her own self-conceptions and seeing what she's actually saying and how adroit she is at handling social situations and really like powering through despite her own, really negative self-image.
That'd be a really interesting thing to do if you just read her POV and then ignored all of her internal monologue.
Yeah, right. Just purely action.
I think she'd probably end up looking like Marjorie a bit.
That's at some point Tyrion. There's a line where she greets Lancel and Kevin at Joffrey's wedding, and Lancel looks, obviously horrible because he's turned into basically a human ghost. And Sansa, praises his valor, and she says all these nice things. And Tyrion, it's from Tyrion's point of view, and he describes both father and son beaming and thinks about what a good queen she would have made. There's no way in that moment that she wasn't terrified, but she's coming away looking as regal as possible, which we should all be impressed by.
And she's also actually fooled Tyrion before by playing on Tyrion's own conceptions of himself, like when he asks her, "Why do you keep going to the Godswood, Sansa?" Mm-hmm. And she's like, "Oh, I'm praying for..." Well, obviously he knows that this is lying. She's obviously not praying for Joffrey.
Right.
Probably for her family. But he asks, "Oh, could I come with you someday, wife?" And she's like, she has to think of what she's going to say. She's like, "No, you would just be bored." And Tyrion thinks, "Oh, she knows me better than I thought. I would be bored." But, we know she's going to the Godswood because she's meeting up with Ser Dantos to plot her escape.
Right.
So she does that. Also, there's something I saw, I've never really noticed this, in this line that sssuperstark
I'm glad
Did I get that right? Did I get that right?
Sure.
Calls out, it says, "Now, wolf girl," talking about, if we're talking about how Sansa's learning to play the game, I don't know that she comes off like Marjorie in the POVs of other characters, but, she is a wolf girl, and now we see her in the Vale with Littlefinger, the Lord of Sheep and Shit, as he says. I'm gonna just say that, even though we're gonna beep it out, because that's how he describes himself. And she's a wolf in sheep's clothing, and I think people don't see her as a wolf. Everyone sees her as this timid little girl, but she is growing in the Vale, where Ned Stark himself also grew up.
Mm-hmm. All right, Matt, do you have a highlight for us?
I do. This highlight is from user avataraccount, and it's sort of an open-ended question. It says, "Who, in your opinion, is the truest knight in the Seven Kingdoms?" Avataraccount offers up Brienne or Beric, but the top-voted one is Sir Gregor Clegane, which is an interesting choice.
Yeah.
And then you get Barristan, you get Davos, and it's sort of an interesting discussion about how would you define a true knight? Do you mean someone that's full of virtue of what they're supposed to be? Is it how much they are in reality like knights? And which characters you value? So what do you guys think?
Can we read aloud? Someone has to read aloud that Gregor Clegane comment.
All right, yeah, I got it. This is from user rustythesmith, and they say, Sir Gregor Clegane is the greatest and truest knight who ever lived. He saved his brother from a fire when he was only a boy, and he's so big and strong that he was knighted by Prince Rhaegar Targaryen himself. But Mad King Ares went mad, and Lord Tywin came to stop him. The mountain was the first one into the city, because he's the most bravest knight in the world, and all the best knights come from the west anyhow, my pa says. And he would have won the hands tourney too, but he got cheated by the Knight of Flowers. The dialect in that comment sort of builds, like it doesn't start out.
Sounds like a little kid.
Yeah. My pa said he
like
would
his
have won the
favorite
hands
wrestler.
tourney too.
Sir Gregor Clegane is the best.
He got cheated by the Knight of Flowers. Oh my goodness.
Even though it's a joke, I think it's a good idea. I mean,
it's clever, isn't it? Because he is bullet point wise. Doesn't he hit most of the bullet points of being a knight? Not in the sense of defending the innocent, but in the sense of like serving his lord and, you know, the biggest and the strongest and the toughest. And
does he break his vows? I don't think he does.
Yes and no. Depends on what you think the vow. Like, there are some areas where they might show what the vows are of a knight.
Do we have the text of the? Is it like a standardized?
Is
there like a standards organization?
Hold on, let me see. There might be one where you like swear to like defend the like Jamie. I think
Jamie brings it up. Yeah,
gets you somewhat close.
So in was it Storm of Swords? Gendry is knighted right under the Hollow Hill. So I think we see there like an example of the oaths. The charges are, in the name of the warrior, I charge you to be brave. In the name of the father, I charge you to be just. Mother, I charge you to defend the young and innocent. And there's a whole like list for the 7. But then there's a less formal ceremony, which I think this is Gendry's. Do you swear before the eyes of gods and men to defend those who cannot defend themselves, to protect all women and children, to obey your captains, liege lord, and king, fight bravely when needed, and do such other tasks as are laid upon you, however hard or humble or dangerous they may be. So
he fails.
He fails on some of those, yeah.
Yeah. He's close, though. He's real close.
He's like 6 for 7.
There's also like how you might compare it to like chivalry, right? Apparently, previously, Leon Gautier, and granted, this was a bit after the time the knight had existed in its traditional form. Gautier makes 10 commandments of chivalry. I was talking about this with Anne, aka Sweet YFT, who used to be part of the Hypes Watch. She's doing other things now. Anyways,
there you go.
Yeah.
And the 10 commandments are like, thou shalt believe all that the church teaches, and thou shalt observe all its directions. 2, thou shalt defend the church. 3, thou shalt respect all weaknesses, and shalt constitute thyself the defender of them. Thou shalt love the country in which thou wast born. Thou shalt not recoil before thine enemy. Thou shalt make war against the infidel without cessation and without mercy. Damn, dude. Okay, thou shalt perform scrupulously thy feudal duties, if they be not contrary to the laws of God. Thou shalt never lie, and shalt remain faithful to thy pledged word. Thou shalt be generous and give largesse to everyone. Thou shalt be everywhere and always the champion of the right and the good against injustice and evil.
Okay, so these are that's sort of the real life knightly vows, right?
Yeah, the IRL vows.
Okay.
Or like not necessarily vows because it's like from the 1800s,
Code of
but
chivalry,
the IRL,
which is...
Sure, right.
I'm glad it's not that long in the books.
Yeah.
I mean, it might be. We don't see the rest of what it says here. We only got...
Yeah, it only goes through the first, 4 of the 7, I think. So.
Yeah, then you get anointed with oils and all this other crazy stuff happens.
What do you think, in the name of the stranger, I charge you to, kill everyone, and if
to
it's
just
for that,
own.
then Gregor, totally does it.
Probably something about beating back on death or something.
Something Shimigami.
Yeah, to kill shinigamis.
Thou shalt use this book to write names.
I just watched Death Note, everyone.
There you go.
Congratulations.
That's what we're referring to. It's an old anime from 12 years ago, but yeah.
I thought maybe you had watched Bleach. I don't know.
I haven't watched. Should I watch Bleach?
No,
you told me to watch Made in Abyss.
Yes, watch Made in Abyss. Everyone who's listening, watch Made in Abyss, especially if you like crazy twists and things that get real. Because you like the series.
So anyway, back to the post.
So who do you think the realist knight is?
Let's go around.
So back to this comment here, the whole Gregor Clegane thing. I it's a little bit scary because Like, you could totally see that that's how the written history could have gone down if, like, the Lannisters stayed in power, right? Like, you can imagine 100 years from now, people reading back about it like, oh, yeah, Sir Gawain, he was, like, a great knight, and he was, first into the city, and, all this kind of, spin. And that kind of makes me wonder, like, all of the historical great knights in the series, like, how many of them were just, like, monsters, but the people who employed them or the people who kind of had their backs politically, like, kind of spun it after the fact. Like, is that, I don't know. Are we going to see that Arthur Dane was actually, like, kind of a horrible person?
Well, we see that Hightower kind of is, with how he's like, ignore what Aerys is doing to everybody else. We have to serve the king. It's like, that is a terrible lesson to be giving out to knights. Ignore everything your liege lord does because you have to obey them. That's not a great thing to be sending out there.
Yeah. I mean, George R. R. Martin has actually said, people have asked him specifically about Arthur Dane. They've said, this seems like a huge contradiction that Arthur Dane is the greatest knight and yet also let Aerys get away with this stuff. And George has said, keep reading, basically. So I think we are going to get more on at least the Tower of Joy knights, how exactly honorable or not honorable they might have been.
So it's interesting that the way that this comment is written is like as though it's from a small child, and you kind of have to wonder what the, I guess, social status of this child is, because it doesn't seem like Gregor Clegane necessarily has even a good reputation amongst the small folk right now, because they know to be scared because the Mountain's men are coming and they're going to pillage and destroy places where you live. And so I think there's something interesting going on. Like, maybe had Tywin's legacy survived further down in the future, sure, maybe his legacy would be more whitewashed, but the difference between that and knights like Arthur Dane is we have personal recollections from people who actually experienced them, as opposed to, like, just only the historic, like, one person's.
Yeah, I could see Tommen saying this. He probably would not have been told all the terrible things Gregor does, only that he's his father's most loyal bannerman.
That's an interesting point, actually.
Yeah.
Because Joffrey seems... I mean, he seems well aware of what Sandor is capable of, but Sandor's not a knight. I mean, he's the dog. He's the guy who does the dirty deeds. I mean, obviously Tywin's fully aware of what Gregor is capable of and all that, but you gotta wonder what Joffrey and Myrcella and Tommen were raised to think about Gregor. We should move it off to some other true knights, though, I think, because Gregor...
Yeah.
People who are actually true knights, maybe.
He's getting way too much of
this.
The one that seems to be getting the most popular votes in this thread is Brienne. So, what are your thoughts on Brienne?
Well, she's not actually a knight. That makes it tough.
That's the point, though, right? That's the consistent themes that the best knights are the people who are not recognized as such, like her and Dunk, right?
Exactly.
Oh, are we saying Dunk never got knighted? Come on, man.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Spoiler alert. Yeah, that's true.
Arlen a penny tree conspiracy.
Yeah, I definitely hold with that.
Yeah, I don't think he was knighted.
But what about Brienne makes her the truest knight then? What does she do that sets her apart from all the other ones we see?
For me, it's her penultimate scene in Book 4 at the Inn at the Crossroads, where she has no chance and no choice, right? Where she has to defend the innocent, even in the face of overwhelming odds. I mean, that, I think, makes her the truest knight. Most of the vows seem to be about, I charge you to be brave, I charge you to be just, I charge you to defend the young and innocent, I charge you to protect all women, to protect those who cannot protect themselves. It all holds to this idea of doing the right thing, defending the innocent, even at the cost of your own life. And that's totally what Brienne is willing to do.
That's true. I also don't think many people would cry over Nimble Dick Crab.
Ah, rip in peace. Yeah, she shows real empathy, too. She's not just, like, performing being a knight. You know, she's not just doing it because she knows she's going to get written about one day or something.
Yeah. This is something that they touch on in The Hedge Knight, which is notable because Brienne, of course, is from the line of Sir Dunk the Lunk.
Thick as a castle wall.
Thick with 2 C's. Anyways, so...
Yeah.
Dunk, without thinking, charges at Aerion Brightflame in order to save Tanzel Tootal. Sure, he, ends up in this terrible situation where he's like, oh my god, I have to be in this, tourney of 7. But, as he's walking around, suddenly all the common people and stuff are just cheering him on. They're like, people who like didn't pay note of him before, they are on his side, and he's like, why is everyone like cheering for me? He goes back to the smith who is like, from whom he got his armor, and he's like, hey, I've come to like pay back stuff. And he's like, nah, you just like hold on to that's yours now. And he's like, he's like, because you were a knight who remembered your vows. And Brienne is doing the same thing as Dunk when she's acting out no chance and no choice.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about another popular choice, Barristan Selmy? Anyone think he's the truest knight? No?
Yeah, don't get me started on this one.
No, please
get started. Get started.
Get started.
From our own circle of the Lunk.
Barristan is the worst. He's very, very, very far from a true knight. I mean, I could go on about this. Like he's a very sort of opportunistic, kind of ethically flexible guy, right? I mean, come on, he served on the small council with Robert when Robert was trying to kill the children that he was actually sworn to protect. And it's this whole thing of like, okay, you know, sure, he was injured in the battle and you know, he couldn't physically oppose Robert's victory and all that. But you don't have to join up with the guy, right? I mean, you don't have to like join with the guy who killed the guy you were sworn to protect and then, you know, join with him as he's plotting to kill them. Like you kind of turned your cloak there a little bit and people give him a free pass for it. Yeah, I don't like Barristan.
I agree with Alex on this one. I know I've talked before with Jeff about this, but Barristan to me reminds me of like an ex-Nazi SS officer on trial during Nuremberg who said he was just following orders. The thing that sticks to me is this line when he's now been outed as Barristan, who's been like traveling incognito as Arson Whitebeard, following Dany. He says he wanted to see if there was some taint in her. Like there was just something small that was wrong. If you just fix this little thing with Aerys, like everything will be fine. But the history records Aerys as being like a complete whack job. It's not that there is something small with him. And so it reminds me of like the people who were around Hitler. Like, oh, he was nice to his dog and as part of his staff, like he was kind to most of them until he wanted to kill most of his generals. But Barristan, from his viewpoint during the war and like the history that's been written since, it doesn't necessarily like fit 1-to-1 with how Barristan views his time in the past. Like it was his service; he served honorably.
Right? Yeah, he's not making moral decisions for himself. You could actually the comment about Gregor. I know we said we wouldn't come back to Gregor, but you could do a similar thing for Barristan because he's sort of checking a lot of boxes. Like when he rescues Aerys from Duskendale, technically, yes, he is obeying his king. He's rescuing his king. In terms of what was actually best for the realm, was that the best thing to do? Or would it have been better to let Aerys die, see Rhaegar crowned? Obviously, people will have different opinions on that and everything, but Barristan's the kind of guy who goes, well, no, I mean, technically I'm supposed to save the king, so I should save the king.
But he's not wrong. They are supposed to obey their liege lords. That's part of the vows.
That's part of the vows, but so is...
It's like malicious compliance, though.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think he saved Aerys because he thought it was the morally right thing to do. I think he saved Aerys because he's a guy who's good at his job and wanted to do his job and wasn't paying attention to the context or wasn't interested in the context in which that job fit. To kind of go with what Aaron was saying. Like he's not thinking about the broader context of his actions. He's just going, okay, well, yeah, I'm a knight. I'm going to do this knight thing. Okay, I did it. All right, good. We're done.
I also think that he just like doesn't understand to the full extent what it means. Perhaps like done because it's the right thing to do. Like you get Barristan Selmy is a study in cognitive dissonance and rationalization, as you guys were talking about, in order to have a coherent, like for one to have a cohesive self-image. For example, in A Dance with Dragons, he tells Drinkwater that the reason Daenerys rebuffed Quentyn was because women choose fire over mud. And I just think that did he like miss the?
Does he say that?
Is that true?
Yeah, he says like women will choose fire over mud like every time, and I'm like, I think you missed the entire part where Dany did not want to marry his Darsa Lorak, but she did it because she wanted to secure peace for her city. It was the harder choice, I think, for her, but it's the one that she felt would be best politically and bring peace to the people that she cared about, that she was leading. And I don't know that Barristan...
He doesn't grasp that,
Grasps that? I don't know that he even, like, cares about the people of Meereen at all. It seems like Barristan is a little classist and maybe xenophobic, but...
Yeah. I'm also going to defend Barristan just for 1 second. When he saved Aerys from Duskendale, Aerys wasn't crazy at that point. He was just kind of like a little kooky. He's like, let's build a second wall. Let's build like an underground passage to bring water to Dorne. Let's build a new King's Landing. Like, he hadn't gone Mad King at that point. It's after Duskendale that happened. So I don't think you can judge him for saving Aerys. You can, in retrospect, be like, maybe that wasn't such a great choice, but how is he supposed to make a proper choice when Aerys wasn't crazy yet?
It's true. Yeah. There's definitely some hindsight there. Although...
he couldn't have known.
You can't know.
Tywin did stand there next to Rhaegar and say, why save Aerys? We have a king right here. Tywin had his own reasons for doing that too. Like, he, at that point, planned Cersei and Rhaegar to marry, so, he had his own terrible motivations. But I'm just saying, the option was presented.
It was presented, but it wasn't endgame Aerys at that point.
Yeah, no, it's true. It wasn't long fingernails, kooky old man Aerys.
Burning people, yeah.
Yeah, right. That was a big thing.
that was a problem, yeah.
There's one comment, though, from Queen Shireen, who says, I'm surprised not to see any support for Davos, which Davos to me kind of feels like he fixes the problems that Barristan and Brienne have, where they both have fleeting loyalties, whereas Davos is very tied to Stannis, but he also sees like the protect the innocent with Edric Storm, Gendry in the show.
That's true.
About saving and doing this, but Davos is more like mud, not like fire, I guess,
because
in some ways.
Because onions grow in the
mud.
Mm-hmm. They grow in the mud.
In the mud. Do they?
I don't know how onion reef works.
Onion reef? Oh my god, that sounds incredible.
Yeah.
The whole discussion that we've had here reminds me a lot of that. I think that there is no real true knight in Westeros. Like, everybody has one aspect that they're kind of missing, and that's what makes the story interesting. And you have to go back to somebody like Dunk before the fall of Paradise to, well, not Paradise, but before the fall of cohesive political something.
But what about Sir Criston Cole? Okay.
Baelor Breakspear.
Screw Criston Cole.
Baelor Breakspear, for instance, I think. Jeff on the last one brought up the JFK comparison, which blew my mind.
What do you mean Brienne has fleeting loyalties? What's her fleeting loyalties?
She keeps switching who she's following, like, all the time. First, she follows Renly, and then she's like, oh, well, now I'll follow Lady Catelyn. But she's like, oh, now I'll follow she's not always...
Well, they keep dying. Renly dies. How can you follow him when he's dead?
Well, that's true. That's probably, like, unfair for me to lump on Brienne. But at the same time, like, loyalty requires two parties to be around each other for a fairly extended period of time. Like, if you work at a job that's like constantly changing ownership, can you really say that that person is a loyal employee of the company when it's constantly changing? Like, it's not tested. And I think that's something that Brienne really needs to have tested in the beginning of the Winds of Winter. We're going to have that because she's now following Stoneheart's orders, and she's just been tasked to bring Jaime to Stoneheart. When placed between the undead corpse of Cat and Jaime, who is she going to choose? Because she finally has to make a choice. And so, like, Jaime, Barristan, Arthur Dayne, they've all been tested. And so for Brienne, like, can you say somebody is fully a true knight when they haven't had all the aspects that entails tested?
Totally.
It'll be tested based on based on her values, because right now she's been able to make that choice based on her values. I just wanted to go back to that Davos point that you were saying about him embodying all of these. He does the thing that Jaime wanted to do, that he calls out, that Hightower didn't do, that Barristan didn't do, in standing up to his liege lord and telling him this was wrong and upholding that morality.
Yeah, that's true. And he's one of the few characters who does. Although, maybe it's just that knights are always like tied to martial thing, you know, sword fighting and all that. I think of Davos as like a true lord as opposed to a true knight. Like,
yeah, that's what he's missing.
He's a good, you know, a moral man, a man who speaks truth to power, all that good stuff. If a knight has to be inherently martial and inherently, you know, battle ready and all that, I don't think Davos is that. He's not much of a swordsman, as he says, right, in the show.
Perfect, Liam Cunningham.
Thank you. Yeah, that was actually Liam Cunningham. He's staying on my couch right now.
Liam, I love you.
Can share a bed later.
Yeah, see which of you stores.
Fowler twins.
I think the point about Barristan's a good one. Like, the Onion Knight is supposed to be mocking in the same way that people call Sam the Slayer in order to make fun of him. And it's a nice inversion of George likes to do, where it's like the thing people get mocked for, they end up being the perfect example of that.
Yes, he is the perfect onion.
He has layers.
Alex, do you have a subreddit highlight to bring to the table?
Yeah, actually, and interestingly enough, by Rusty the Smith, who was our Sir Gregor commenter.
Crushing it, Rusty.
Yeah.
Crusty.
So this one was about Melisandre's Seduction and the Shadow That Almost Was. It's a collection of passages of the Melisandre and Jon scenes up at the wall. The sort of lead up of her trying to basically get with Jon to produce a shadow demon baby and to use that for God knows what. There's that explicit offer of that, right? She says, you know, we have power in our joining. Beyond that, and before that, there's a lot of other more subtle things that this user's pointed out, relationship between her and Jon. Specifically the stuff with the direwolf. Personally, I didn't catch on my first read.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mel's totally trying to get with the ghost. I agree.
She is. I mean, that is how it reads, and I kind of missed it too, actually. Like, it's really obvious in retrospect. 'Cause she gazed at Ghost. May I touch your ... wolf? Like, the thought made Jon uneasy.
Yeah, he doesn't approve of this union between Melisandre and Ghost.
No, it's just his head on Ghost's body, right? I think we've established by now that that's how it works.
Yeah, perfect. There we go.
No, yeah, it is. It's very, very seductive, yeah. Which I think is Mel's whole character. From the moment we meet her, she's, I don't know, swooping around in her red gown, seducing people.
With her heart-shaped face.
With her heart-shaped face, yeah.
It's also impressive that she can sing Ghost to come over to her. It's like, that's a rare woman that can sing seduction into a man.
Into a wolf?
Yeah.
Usually I'd use a whistle, but, you know.
Well, no, Ghost is a man. He's a man wolf.
Sure. Yeah.
Man bear pig.
Well, he is, because Jon's experiencing what Ghost is experiencing on some level. They are linked, I guess. She's like stroking Ghost. What is that doing to Jon, right? So once you kind of add together the whole, yeah, she probably knows that he's a, warg and that he's connected to Ghost. So it's not just the kind of, it's the mystery of like, why is Ghost drawn to her? That's one layer of it. Underneath it, maybe it's Ghost is drawn to her because Jon is drawn to her, and maybe, she's kind of playing into that with her interactions with Ghost.
It could also be trying to appeal to his more instinct side. Like, Jon is the head and she's trying to appeal to his wolf, quote unquote. And it's like she's literally just doing that in front of him. I also thought it was a good question at the end. What did she want a shadow baby with Jon for? We know why she used them before, which was to kill Renly, and also what was that guy's name that was
Sir Courtney Penrose? How could you forget? He's also a true knight.
Then bring on your storm, sir.
Oh my God.
He's a true knight.
And remember the name of this castle.
I forgot Courtney Penrose.
Buddy.
God.
But what is she really? What does she want a shadow baby with Jon for?
Anything. I mean, if you could make shadow babies, you just pop them out, right?
To run the kitchen?
You don't even need a target, right? When you're setting this up.
But she has one. She always has a target in mind.
Oh, sure.
Do you have to have a target in mind to make a shadow
I feel
baby?
like
do you?
In the first
it's
place?
like a voodoo kind of thing where you have like a specific. You need like a hank of hair or something. Like you're aiming it at somebody. It's like a curse you're putting on someone.
It's like a shadow baby cannon.
So is this like while the shadow baby is being produced, or while it's being manufactured, I guess.
Well, yeah, she never says go kill Renly to the baby.
Like what do you like? Hold the image of the person in your head, like that you want to kill. Like that's
You have to write their name and burn
it in a book and a cause of death. Yeah.
Maybe it was one option they bring up is Ramsay. I think that's a good one. They also bring up I'm not sure if this is brought up, but God, what's his name?
Bowen Marsh.
Yeah, maybe
How
Bowen
could you
Marsh.
forget the old pomegranate?
Because that's what I know him as. I forget his name all the time. I always think of his pomegranate. Bowen Marsh would be another good one. Someone Jon can't kill, but probably would want to as an enemy. Especially because Mel seems to see the danger coming.
Yeah, I wonder if she couldn't use the shadow as like a bodyguard kind of figure, or a supernatural sentinel.
That's another question. There is like, who decides who the target is? Is it her, or is it whoever she's pairing with? I mean, because obviously the people that died from the Shadow Babies before were people that Stannis wanted dead.
True.
Was that Melisandre acting on his behalf, or was it just sort of a manifestation of Stannis' desires?
Interesting, yeah.
Also, could it have even been Ramsay if he's within Winterfell, right? Because theoretically, Winterfell maybe also has a lot of magic wards around it the way that Storm's End does. And
True. Good call.
Davos had to row Melisandre underneath Storm's End for her to be able to birth the Shadow Baby.
That's a great point, actually, yeah.
And get inside Storm's End.
So it's somebody probably very close by that she wanted to kill but couldn't. Or if she thought Jon would want to kill. That would help her.
Maybe it was Celise. Maybe she was just, I'm so annoyed at this person.
Or it's just, she really wanted to get with Jon, and it's just, an excuse.
Oh, yeah, right.
Well, she does explicitly call out that we can make a shadow baby. It's not just like, we should bump uglies because we're both hot.
I feel like she'd actually have a better chance if she just went with the latter as opposed to the former. Like,
actually, she would
Jon, you're pretty stressed.
Look how warm my skin is. We can do this.
Yeah, that's how normal
exactly.
people do that.
I'm warm.
Check out my flesh.
Isn't Jon also like 14?
I think he's like 15 or 16.
Oh, okay.
He's
like
16 by now.
That makes it better.
Slightly better. She's also like 400.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't.
There's a large gap there.
It's sort of an Edward and Bella kind of...
I was thinking the exact same thing.
Half your age plus 200, right? It's like...
Yes.
Half your age plus 200. Yeah. No, it's definitely a Twilight kind of thing, isn't it?
Especially as they are in the twilight of the next long night.
Oh,
perhaps.
Wow. I bet he was inspired by Twilight. I mean, I guess part of the question here, and what makes it an open question about what she would use a Shadow Baby for, is we don't know exactly what shadow binding can do. I mean, it can do whatever George wants it to, is the answer. But we've seen it serve as an assassin. Could it do, like, if maybe it's not just a shadow baby she can create. Maybe if she and Jon bumped uglies, as Matt put it, maybe she could also use that to create some sort of, I don't know, magic
accountant
sort, an accountant. Right, her magic. So maybe she could make like a shadow dragon or something. It's only limited by what George doesn't want to do.
True.
So,
well, the other thing is that shadow babies sort of dissolve very quickly. Maybe she could make like a permanent one since she's at the wall.
Yeah, maybe now she's hit level 15, she can take the permanency meta magic feat and.
Maybe she wants her own. She wants her own wolf.
A shadow wolf.
And she's gonna just make a shadow.
A shadow wolf.
Yeah.
There's a whole thing with shadows here in their conversation where she's very explicit about, like, she says that every man who walks the earth casts a shadow.
Mm-hmm.
Some men's shadows are thin and weak. And other men's shadows are, long and dark and powerful.
Thick as a castle wall.
What are we talking about?
They're shadows, Eliana.
And then she tells Jon that his shadow is enormous.
It's 20 feet tall.
Which we know from the show isn't true. They joke about it being very small.
Maybe, she just wants to have whatever power she's possibly capable of, and maybe she's not getting that power, that degree of shadow.
She's not, yeah.
She needs the good shadow.
She's not getting it on the daily. She needs to,
maybe
get some side shadow.
Yeah.
Maybe she should find Tyrion, because apparently he casts a giant
That's
shadow.
a great point, actually.
Yeah, he does. The other thing is Stannis being described as the blue-eyed king who casts no shadow.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it's like his ability to
she's been used up.
Yeah, his ability, whatever magical spirit or source or whatever is in you as a king is not infinite. Maybe it's not just like it's limited. You can only do it like once or twice.
No, that's actually true. After Melisandre takes Stannis' shadow babies twice, he actually ages 15 years overnight or something.
Yeah,
his
right.
probably actually something to that. And also, I was thinking of another thing. In Melisandre's POV, she asks to see the true enemy, and she gets shown Bloodraven and Bran. Maybe she was planning to try and kill them.
Oh,
that's
dark.
Yeah.
She gets shown both of them.
Right,
and it'd be even better if Melanie Seastar is actually true and Bloodraven's her father. That'd be even better.
Ooh, now we're getting into some deep territory here. This question of like power levels is interesting though, because she seems to imply here that Jon is like somehow extremely powerful, and maybe that's a property of Targaryen blood. Maybe that's just a random thing.
Or he's 16 years old and has a lot of life left after him if it's actually about life
force.
force.
Yeah, that could be too, yeah.
Maybe he just has a strong paw. Star Trek reference, had to get it in.
Yeah. a strong paw.
I thought we were talking about ghosts.
Like ghost paw.
Yeah, I was like, I guess so. He is a direwolf. I also think something we haven't like talked about here is like how she channels Ygritte.
Yes.
Yeah.
To try and get him to feel warmer towards her.
No, it's true.
Yeah. How does she do that? Didn't she get buried, or did Jon burn her?
Did she find a Polaroid of like Ygritte?
Yeah. Jon burned her.
He definitely burned her. So how did she find it? How did she know Ygritte at all?
I think it's not that she was becoming Ygritte specifically. It's that she had sort of a little magic glamour about her that made Jon see what he wanted to see in a woman.
So a Jon specific one.
Yeah.
Well, not So like if Ned had looked at her, he would have seen Catelyn. You know what I mean? Like
no, he would have seen Robert.
And if anyway.
I agree, because it seems like that's the way glamours work to an extent based on the explanation we get, right?
It's not like she is turning herself into Ygritte specifically. It's like she's sort of putting this cloud over herself of suggestion that makes you think, oh, is that Ygritte? Like you sort of squint and that's sort of how Maynard Plum is described in the Mystery Knight as well, when it's Bloodraven in disguise. When he's in full daylight or whatever, you kind of squint at him and you're like, who is that? Oh, that's Maynard, I guess.
Finger guns. Pew, pew.
Yeah.
Where it's about expectation and...
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So her expectation is just like, I want to look like whoever Jon wants to bone at the moment.
Well, that's how Melisandre explains like Mance's glamour about the Lord of Bones, and when she tells him don't take off the mask, she's like, the spell is made of shadow and suggestion. Men see what they expect to see.
There we go.
It's interesting because like obviously magic might be tied with power, of course, and the phrasing I feel is kind of similar, like power resides where men believe it resides, and people see what they want to see. Yeah. And I feel like there's something being toyed with there. That's
a nice thread, yeah. I feel like I'm going to be thinking about that one for a while now.
Write a post, Eliana.
That's really all there is. Like,
it's
I don't know
one.
Why people tell me to write posts.
Yeah.
It's a good short post. It doesn't have to be 9 pages on Weirwoods. It can be short.
True. Hashtag small post.
Do you think if he had created like a shadow baby thing with Mel, that he would have lost some of his skin changing capabilities? That it would have drained him of his special abilities and sort of made him more of a regular guy? Yeah, would it sucked his midichlorians out?
We don't
know,
speak about those.
I don't know.
That's a good question, because it seems like the shadow baby thing is basically just sort of skin changing the air.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. Is it like, so in skin changing, if your soul is going into an animal or your consciousness, is the shadow baby a piece of that consciousness ripped out? Like if your consciousness is like a blob of cheese, then this shadow baby is a chunk of cheese ripped off of the blob, and now there's less cheese. Do you know what I mean?
I think you're right, because we're told that green seers have very short lives, and it may be because they leave their bodies a lot.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, right.
Maybe when you leave your body, it like dies a little bit or something.
Le petit mort. Mm-hmm.
That's not what that is about.
Oh, classic.
I'm sorely mistaken.
I have a small post from the Three-Eyed Crow T Robot.
I don't know what that is about.
Mystery Science Theater joke.
You did not get that reference. The master would not approve.
What?
It's really weird.
Oh, okay. And it's called Will Theon Be Able to Confess? Now, this is the part where I warn people that, yes, we are going into the Winds of Winter territory, and this comes from the Theon POV chapter in the Winds of Winter. And they're talking about how Asha seems to have brokered a deal with Stannis. In exchange for her cooperation, Stannis accepts her proposal to sacrifice Theon to the heart tree in the middle of the lake instead of immolating him. And then there are some ravens calling and going, "The tree! The tree! The tree!" Then, "Theon! Theon! Theon!" And then Three-Eyed Crow-T Robot asks, is presumably Theon will have to confess to killing Bran and Rickon before he loses his head. Assuming that Theon is the only one in this scenario who knows the truth about Ned Stark's sons, it's reasonable that he would falsely confess to end his miserable existence. But can he? Here's some folklore about the power of a heart tree from Jon's POV in A Clash of Kings. Jon said, "My lord father believed no man could tell a lie in front of a heart tree. The old gods know when men are lying. My father believed the same," said the old bear. "Let me have a look at that skull." And then going along with the theory that Bran and Bloodraven are skin-changing the ravens there, who are being, like, super weird and very noisy, Theon's fate might not be so sealed. And the reason why this is a question for them is because, like, for Stannis, I guess, to feel more justified about sacrificing/executing Theon, as we see, it would have to be in exchange for an actual crime. So, can Theon do it? Is he gonna do it? Would he do it?
Is he going to stick to his false story in order to, like, be the Theon everyone thinks he is?
Or
right,
just
like,
suicidal, I guess.
Yeah, like it's like suicide by cop kind of thing. And will the heart tree let him do that?
Yeah, is he gonna pull a Tyrion Lannister?
I wish I were the monster you think I was. Yeah, I mean, maybe, like, because I could see something where, I mean, there's this folklore about no man could tell a lie, but I wonder if we'll see that practically played out with Theon sort of recognizing Bran in the heart tree somehow. You know, like if he's kneeling before the heart tree, the sword's at his neck, and he's like staring right into that creepy face, and then he like sees Bran's boyish visage in the tree. You know, speaking to him somehow or communicating to him somehow. If that could be sort of a manifestation of that folklore.
He sees Bran in Winterfell, so that seems to be what the Ravens are like. Look, you saw Bran. He's still alive. Pay attention, Theon. You didn't actually kill him.
I feel like Theon's also wrestling with this question within himself anyway in that chapter. Like, this is like my new favorite chapter. So Theon's in wrestling with the question of, like, technically he didn't kill Bran and Rickon. He's like, those were the Miller's boys, and you can see this coming back up in his thought process.
Yeah.
And he tries to rationalize it to himself by being like, also, I didn't kill him. Ramsay made me do it. And he's like trying to explain that to others. He actually tried to explain that when he was first captured to an extent, and everyone was like, oh my god, he's crazy. But he might be veering away from even wanting to confess to killing Bran and Rickon.
Yeah, right.
Would it even save his life? I mean, he's still confessing to murder.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's...
Killing 2 kids. I mean, Stannis is very by the law kind of person.
Yeah, right. Like, it is still morally bad. It's also... It would still be significant for the North to know that he didn't actually kill the Stark boys, because you could see a world where Stannis or whoever creates sort of like a spin on it. They're like, Theon was really just being manipulated by these evil Boltons, and Theon actually saved the Stark boys by, faking that. You could see this, I don't know, someone taking advantage of the truth to turn it into propaganda for anti-Bolton sentiments.
Yeah.
Like you need the spin against the Boltons.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. But like, in addition to rehabilitating Theon a little bit, because I'm still kind of the opinion that Theon has an end game in the Iron Islands, and that Asha's going to prop him up at a Kingsmoot or so, a second Kingsmoot, or prop him up as a pretender, or at least an excuse to overthrow Euron. Yeah, the latecomer thing. So if there's a rehabilitation project for him coming, it might make sense if people want to paint him as the guy who outwitted the Boltons by letting the Stark boys escape, as opposed to the guy who killed the Stark boys and everyone hates him. Because it would be advantageous for Wyman Manderley and all them to have a Theon Greyjoy who is an ally ruling the Iron Islands.
That's true. Yeah.
So I don't know. That there's so many ifs in there that, it's...
But, like, the top comment on this post, Idols to Effigies, does ask that same question of, like, I don't know, would Stannis even believe him?
Yeah, right.
Like, and even, I don't know, if he did, like, would it change Stannis' mind? I don't know. Maybe not, but...
Well, Theon would have to convince him that he's worth more alive than dead, basically. So would this information be good enough that he's like, all right, Theon, you can live?
You know what needs to happen? Because there are all these birds there... Because there are all these burbs there...
Burbs?
All the burbs come and they start, like, flying around, they start freaking out, and they're hitting everyone in the face, and they're like, stop, don't kill Theon! But they don't say it because they don't speak in, like,
no, kill!
full sentences. Yeah, they just go, stop! Or they're like, Theon! And then they just, like, squawk and hit people in the face with their little bird bodies.
It's going to be Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds by way of Stannis Baratheon.
Yes, it is going to be like that.
So the whole discussion here with Theon's pending execution and all that, and what could happen if him being installed in the Iron Isles, I don't see that happening. I don't see Stannis being the one to, like, forgive him and set him free and be like, oh, I can use you politically, right? That just doesn't seem like it's in keeping with Stannis' character to forgive somebody for all of Theon's actual crimes, regardless of killing Bran and Rickon. No, we kind of turn that on its head and say, what would make him be forgiven? What would get him off the hook? I don't think the political thing is enough, but I think if he had some sort of intercession from Bran or Rickon, who came out and was like, hey, we forgive him, he's cool with us. Like, would that be enough for the North to be like, oh, you don't have to kill him anymore?
I kind of think so. I mean, the North is, if not overtly religious, at least really superstitious about the heart trees. So if Theon's about to be sacrificed in front of a heart tree and then a swarm of ravens comes down and interrupts the execution, you got to imagine that all these Northerners standing around are going to go, whoa.
Yeah, the mountain clans especially. Right. They're going to be like, hey, man.
Yeah, exactly. And the mountain clans also can testify that Bran is alive. Morgan the Little.
Yes, yeah.
Morgan Little.
Okay.
Who...
Pieces coming together, yeah.
And he's with Stannis right now. As someone in the comments pointed this out, I'm not very smart, so I'd forgotten that. But
Mithras Stoneborn.
Oh, Mithras Stoneborn pointed that out. That the Little is the Little Morgan Little of House Little. For those who are confused, I'm saying Little LIDDLE as opposed to S Superstar.
Oh my god.
But yeah, so there's a combination of people who can testify to Theon's quote-unquote innocence and the potential for some cool superstitious imagery as Theon is potentially spared.
Yeah, and I think with Theon having these kind of interactions with the werewoods where he hears it talking to him and, he says the ravens, oh my god, the ravens know my name. If there's anybody like south of the wall who's going to kind of wake up to the fact that something's going on with this whole like werewood network and the ravens, if there's anybody that's going to kind of catch on to that, I think it's Theon. So maybe if he's the one who kind of goes out on a limb and kind of reaches out and kind of prays to the werewood and says like, hey, if anybody's listening, help.
Right.
Like, what if the mountain clans see this happening and they sort of say like, you have to spare Theon. The old gods have marked him, or else we're out of here, Stannis.
Yeah, right.
Like
See,
he's the prophet.
That would do it. That would be enough. Yeah,
right.
Knowing that George has like come from a religious foundation, he would, I think, understand. Even people who are super religious, somewhat in the back of their minds, kind of like doubt their religion. But if they see something crazy and miraculous like that happen, it also is a huge reinforcement to their own beliefs, so that they'd almost feel predicated to follow through with sparing Theon, like with a strong sense that like they've never felt something like this before.
Yeah, George has said before that there's a lot of people who aren't very religious, but if they actually saw someone walking on water, that might change a lot of minds, and that's totally something that he's going to do. So I would definitely expect to see some evidence of the old gods shown to a bunch of Northerners, and this seems like a good place for it.
I'm gonna go somewhere crazy for a second.
Go.
Oh.
inspired by Aaron's comment of what he was saying about religious miraculous signs, and then also looping in another well-known theory called the night lamp theory by Cantus, right? Of how Cantus suggests that Stannis is going to burn the Heart Tree to mislead the Bolton army and into believing that he is based there, luring them onto the icy frozen lake where they will all fall into the water to their icy deaths. But, okay, so Heart Tree, right? Burning. Moses in the wilderness with the burning bush.
Wow.
Oh,
That's where I was going.
That's excellent.
with
That's
this.
good stuff.
Not the conversion.
That's
Another
really
post.
good stuff.
So,
And you know whose hair changed color after he saw the burning bush? Moses. You know his hair has changed color? Theon's.
Theon's, yes. Okay.
Ooh, this is actually pretty good.
Like, all of these, like, could come together. Now that I'm just tinfoiling here. But I wanted to also go back to something someone was saying earlier about, I think it was Alex saying about, like, would Stannis forgive Theon and prop him up? I'm not sure if Stannis would forgive Theon, but we do have precedent of Stannis having a similar strategy. He tells Jon, desert the Night's Watch, become the Lord in Winterfell, and Stannis attempts to try and get Jon to break his vows, which would be unforgivable, as we see in the first chapter of A Game of Thrones. Garrett had perfectly good reason to be scared for his life. And, I mean, granted, no one believed him. But deserting the Night's Watch is unforgivable.
Right.
And Stannis says that he would pardon that, prop Jon up, make him Lord of Winterfell. I could see him potentially considering a strategy at the very least where he tries to prop Theon up as a lord loyal to him
Lord
in
Commander.
the Iron Islands. Yeah, he's thought it before.
Yeah, that's a great connection to Jon, actually, yeah.
I think going off of that, Jon and Theon might switch places because Theon multiple times has thought about joining the Night's Watch himself, how he thinks that is where he would like to go. So what if he has some sort of religious conversion in this moment, because it seems like that's where he's going. He seems to believe in the old gods. Maybe as Jon comes south to become Lord of Winterfell, Theon goes north as like almost like a prophet sort of and takes over the Night's Watch. The wildlings will believe him. The wildlings love the old gods. Yeah.
Like he's the John the Baptist to Jon's Jesus.
There could be like a religious, because the Night's Watch has become more Faith of the Seven over the years. They even have a little sept there. Like Theon might show up and they might just start like kicking out all the Southerners.
And like Moses, he was raised by different people than his own parents.
That's true. That's true. Oh, wow.
I should probably stop. I should stop. I should stop going down this.
There's a Moses Theon thing.
Madness this way lies.
No, I mean it's the Bible and Song of Ice and Fire. It's like
I mean it's yeah.
It's the same. Yeah. Eliana, you did write that great thing about the Forsaken and the biblical.
Oh wait, and Aaron Greyjoy, because Moses is accompanied by an Aaron.
Yes, Aaron Greyjoy.
Okay.
So the Greyjoys and sort of Old Testament narratives, it's not unprecedented. I think it's all there.
The post that I wrote was actually New Testament because it was.
Oh right,
Jesus
yeah, that was
desert.
the Jesus stuff. Yeah.
Jesus is a pretty big part of the New Testament.
Yeah,
being the
he's
New Testament.
like the main character.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
It's the whole reason it's new.
He's sort of, you might call him the Jon Snow of the New Testament.
I was going to say about Asha before we move on.
Last thing.
Her role in this is also going to be important. She might be convinced of the old god's power with Theon at the same time because she's a doubter in the Drown God. And if Theon goes north or Theon goes back to the Iron Islands, they might bring the faith the old gods back with them.
From Asha's point of view, she could see the Bolton army getting swallowed up by the lake, part of the Drowned God.
Ooh.
It may just reinforce her own religion, like the Drowned God is real, and he had a part in all of this, so...
Oh, but also, wait, the Bolton army drowning. Just gonna throw this out there. Moses and the parting of the Red Sea. Drowning of the Egyptians.
Ooh, parting of the lake.
Now there's meat on these bones. We got the burning bush. We got the drowning of
Naga's
the Egyptians.
bones?
Naga's bones.
Oh snap.
We
Thank
know
you
it.
everyone for joining us for this tinfoil session.
Well, that Theon post that we really dove deep into is a great segue to our main topic for the day, which might turn into sort of a Thunderdome. We'll see. Today we're talking about the Pink Letter. Now, a couple weeks ago, as of recording, we hosted on the subreddit a discussion thread, which Brennan B. Fish posted about the pink letter, and there was a lot of really great discussion on who the author could be, the motivations for different people to write it, the outcomes that we're seeing as a result of it. So we wanted to highlight some of those comments and discussions, but also offer our own thoughts on who the author could be. And I know at least a couple of us have some very different opinions. So for those who may not have read the books in a long time,
read the whole thing. Do it as Gollum.
The letter itself is a letter sent from Ramsay to Jon Snow in his last chapter of A Dance with Dragons. And the letter reads,
"Bastard, your false king is dead, bastard. He and all his host were smashed in 7 days of battle. I have his magic sword till his red hair. Your false king's friends are dead. Their heads upon the walls of Winterfell. Come see them, bastard. Your false king lied, and so did you. You told the world you burned the king beyond the wall. Instead, you sent him to Winterfell to steal my bride from me. I will have my bride back. If you want Mance Rayder back, come and get him. I have him in a cage for all the north to see. Proof of your lies. The cage is cold, but I have made him a warm cloak from the skins of the 6 whores who came with him to Winterfell. I want my bride back. I want the false king's queen. I want his daughter and his red witch. I want this wildling princess. I want his little prince, the wildling babe. And I want my reek. Send them to me, bastard, and I will not trouble you or your black crows. Keep them from me, and I will cut out your bastard's heart and eat it.
Ramsay Bolton, true-born Lord of Winterfell. Mwah, love. XOXO.
XOXO, Gossip Gal.
So the thing with the letter is that a lot of people question whether it's written by Ramsay at all. Ramsay has distinctive penmanship that I guess wasn't in this letter. He also tends to send letters in blood, written in blood, and also with pieces of skin. None of that was there.
So alt.
And they question some things he knows, like about the wildling princess and whether or not Stannis is really dead. So the question in the fandom is, was this really written by Ramsay? And if it wasn't, then who and why?
Yeah. So where does everyone stand on this? I mean, there's lots of different possibilities. So I feel like each of us has a different idea. I tell you what, I'll go first since I'm the orthodox letter, and then we'll move steadily.
We'll slide down into the crazy stuff, yeah.
I wasn't going to say that, but... So personally, I have always been of the opinion that while I like a lot of these theories, that it's Ramsay. I would call myself like an orthodox pink letter practitioner. I think it makes a lot of sense to be Ramsay. I don't think necessarily everything is true, even if Ramsay might think it's true, and we can talk about that. But I think that Ramsay makes a lot of sense as the author of the letter because there's ways to explain how he knows what he knows that are fairly consistent with what we see from the story. So I'm orthodox. I'm orthodox. It's Ramsay.
So there's a part of me that like doesn't even care. I'm like, the pink letter's author is gonna be like, whoever it is, whatevs, dude. Like, and we'll just find out. It's not like, yeah, I'll go into it more later, but I think it's either Ramsay or one of the 3 people, or all 3 of them together. Stannis, Theon, and Asha, based on some of the stuff from the Theon 1 TWOW chapter. So it's either, I think, someone in that crew, or it's Ramsay. But, like, it's gonna be what it's gonna be.
Okay, so you have no horse in the race, necessarily.
I feel like I guess a Zorse, but, like...
a Zorse in the race,
like,
okay.
Like, maybe a couple Zorses, but, like, that's the thing. I've just got so many Zorses that I'm just like, what else, dude?
Okay, yeah.
So for mine, I used to not care, because I used to, like Eliana, I was like, what's the big deal? Then I sort of got convinced it was maybe Mance, just from some of the very weird things that Ramsay's asking for that seems like Mance would want to. But I've come down to the orthodoxy that Michael follows, that I think it's Ramsay, and that I think that he's been tricked by Stannis into believing some of the things that he writes.
Yeah, sure.
Because some of the things make no sense if people are writing it. Like, why would you, if you're faking it, like let's say you're Stannis or something like that, and you write to Jon, why would you ask for Reek? Like, You know you have him. What would be the point of doing that? It doesn't make any sense, basically. Why would you ask Jon for Theon?
Okay, yeah, right.
If you see what I mean.
Right, yeah. Okay, so you're also Orthodox. All right.
I don't know if mine's crazier than Alex's, but I'm Orthodox in the sense that it has to come from Ramsay, but I entertain the idea that it is dictated by...
What?
Okay, this is more crazy, apparently.
I mean, I've never heard this. Like, maybe it's not that crazy.
This is the craziest.
I've never heard that.
All right.
This is going to be more of an uphill battle than I thought. Give me a minute to collect my thoughts, because this is going to take a while. Alex, you're up.
Okay, well, so here's my own personal crazy idea here. It's the idea that Lady Dustin was the one to write and send the letter.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole bunch of little pieces that come to possibly suggest this. She has that grudge against Ramsay because she thinks that he killed Domeric, who was her page for like 4 years. You know, he was like a son to her. So she has that kind of grudge against the Boltons, specifically Ramsay, and wants to kind of take him down. And she's got this interest in the crypts there, kind of bugging Theon about it in Winterfell. And obviously we know that Mance being there in Winterfell as, was it Abel is his, his sort of identity there, seems to be suggesting or taken from that, wildling legend of Bael the Bard.
Yeah.
Who hid down in the crypts of Winterfell. So there's that strong suggestion that Mance is going to be hiding in the crypts, right? And so for Lady Dustin to be the one who is kind of checking out the crypts in there kind of suggests that she might be working with Mance. So she has this motive to, try and hurt the Boltons somehow, and she might want to cast in with Stannis and with Jon. So it's a stretch, right? But there is the fact that, she does write and send her own letters. This whole line in there about the warm cloak, right? Where that's only mentioned one other time in the series, and it's in her discussion with Theon about going down to the crypts. I think finally there was the bit about the snowmen that are up on the walls around Winterfell that are in the shape of people who actually might be allies for Stannis. And then there's the little bit in the letter about having come see all these people on the walls of Winterfell. So kind of a suggestion that maybe there might be some sort of coded message in the letter, or, there may be kind of deeper layers here and it's not quite what it appears to be on the surface.
Yeah. I want to sort of credit you here a little bit in that there were people in this discussion thread like calling out your post. They were like, "Oh, I think it's this one. I think it's this." Like they were referencing this.
It's like 2 years ago.
Yeah, right? Yeah. I mean, it's
this was your award-winning post too.
Yeah, well, award tying.
Award tying post. Yeah.
Oh, this isn't what it was for, huh?
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yep. I mean, we were joking about it being crackpot, but like there are actually, I think, quite a lot of people who kind of really dig this idea of Barbary Dustin and Mance, especially because Barbary is introduced in A Dance with Dragons. She's memorable. She's clearly like up to stuff, scheming, hanging around, plumbing the crypts. So when this mysterious letter pops up, it's good thinking to tie it to Barbary Dustin.
She's a bit of a wild card too.
Wild cards.
A wild
cards. Mississippi roll. She seems to be lying to everybody. You can't pin down what she's doing. It's sort of like almost like a little finger scenario. It's like, what does she really want? So she lends herself very well to conspiracies because that's what she's up to.
Yeah.
I said back in that when I first wrote this post 2 years ago, I said I think of her as the little finger of the North, right? Where she is this kind of like schemer behind the scenes doing something, but we're not quite sure what her end game is. Now, in the 2 years since I wrote that post, I think my thinking on this has changed a little bit. It's evolved, right?
Breaking news.
Your character arc, your character development.
Yeah, so I do think that she's up to something. I think she's hiding Mance, for sure. I think that she is in league with Big Walder. Her kind of gifting him the horse, and then Big Walder killing Little Walder. And I have another post about how that makes him Ramsay's cupbearer now and gets him sort of moved in position to kill Ramsay. So I do think that there's something going on with her working with Big Walder, her making moves against Ramsay, and her being involved with hiding Mance. So she is definitely tied to this whole scene going on here. But whether or not she actually wrote or dictated the pink letter itself, I don't know. These days, I find myself thinking more along the lines of Stannis with Theon.
Okay,
Ooh.
interesting.
Fascinating.
One thing in support of the Barbary Dustin is that sort of a subplot that's going on with the Battle of Ice and what's happening after is all the factions on the side of Stannis, almost none of them seem to want Stannis to be king afterwards. Like the Manderleys seemingly have Rickon, the Mountain clans are looking for Arya. If Barbary Dustin's helping them, it's probably not for Stannis. She's probably trying to put somebody else in Winterfell herself or take control of it. So having Jon come south, maybe that's somebody that she would rather see take over the castle than actually Stannis itself.
Well, and when we look at Barbary's own motivation, I mean, she presents herself as really not liking the Starks when she talks to Theon.
But then she goes against that, where she says she wants to be a part of them.
Yeah.
She loves them.
It's a love-hate
I mean,
thing,
she contains multitudes.
She hates Ned. I don't know if she hates the Starks. She definitely hates Ned, though.
Oh, yeah.
That's true. Yeah. But so I wonder what then she would think of Jon Snow. Does she think of him as all of the worst things about Ned? He's Ned's bastard. Is he like evil Ned? Or is he a chance to put a Stark... You know, if she's trying to get him to come south, then is she trying to get Jon Snow on the throne in Winterfell, or is she trying to get him killed at Winterfell?
It could be... Well, she could see a lot of Brandon in him, because he has that reputation from the Wall at this point. She does love Brandon Stark.
So if Barbary Dustin were working together with Mance, that would explain the constant repetition of the word bastard, because that is the reason Jon told Mance he joined the Wildlings, even though we know that's not true. And like him just trying to goad him.
Some of it, yeah.
Yeah, the bastard part seems like it might be trying to get at that, and then like the end, the like last paragraph is like, I'm gonna just try everything, and one of these is gonna stick. And like, that's a strategy, you know? Like, one of these is gonna work, so they're like, try everything. But
the weird thing about the letter, though, is that I don't think it ever mentions Arya, does it? And at this point, that would be the number one thing to piss off Jon.
No, he does mention Arya, because he says, I will have my bride back.
But they don't say the name Arya, is what he's saying.
Okay, that's true.
If you say it's Arya Stark, your sister, I mean, Jon's coming down in a second.
Your sister.
Yeah. I see what you mean. Yeah. It's interesting the way the Wildling Princess and the Little Prince are part of Stannis' court in this letter. They're Stannis' property. They're part of Stannis' ownership, I guess. They're not the Wildling Princess. It's Stannis' Wildling Princess.
Anyway, so, Aaron, what do you think?
Okay. Before I get into the crazy about the letter itself and the theories behind it, because here's the thing. When I first read this chapter, and I think a lot of people had this feeling too, it is so filled with like this sense of horror and dread when the letter arrives. Like, it really impacts you as a reader. It fills you with emotion. And I think for an author, that is potentially the most important thing that an author can do. And so to say, if George were to, in the next book, make this a twist, especially like changing it to somebody who's writing the letter to give Jon some sort of benefit, like make him the Lord of Winterfell, it would undercut the sense of horror that you get on a reread when the letter appears. Like, George has never done this kind of a twist in the entire series. Like, if you go back and reread Ned's death, or The Red Wedding, Stoneheart's apparition, Obern's trial by combat, like this same emotion and tone has always been preserved. Yeah, there's a bit more to them, but you still get the same feeling that you got from them on your first read. If George were to change the author of the Pink Letter and their motivations, he would be fundamentally altering in a negative way, harming the emotional experience that a reader gets rereading one of his best chapters. Like, if the letter arrives and you know it's coming from Stannis, it's not near as impactful as if you think it's coming from Ramsay as a declaration of war.
Interesting, yeah, like...
I think to say that he would do that is kind of a misunderstanding of the author.
Yeah.
So I think the letter has to be legitimate. It has to come from Team Ramsay.
Okay.
However, there are a couple things in the letter that stand out to me, where I entertain the possibility that there might be somebody else who has a hand in its creation. Specifically, it's the stuff about Jon being a liar. Like, I can see Ramsay being really upset that Jon sent Mance down to steal his bride from him, and that he's lost his reek. But the stuff about Jon being a liar... Like, I can't really imagine him taking issue with Jon's character and the fact that he's not told the truth.
Okay.
It's more just the pure fact that he's declared a personal war against him.
Right. Okay. I see the... Yeah.
And it's also this line here about proof of Jon's lies. Specifically proof in the fact that Mance Rayder is still alive. Like, I can't imagine before this incident, Ramsay gave 2 shakes of a stick at Jon or Mance.
Sure.
But proof is something that you're excited to get if you, like, thought or accused somebody of being a liar before, but you never had actual evidence that they are, in fact, a liar.
Right.
So I can't really see why Ramsay is so concerned with the fact that Jon didn't burn Mance and the fact that Jon is actually a liar.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, he's kind of a psychopath, so I mean, you can kind of write in whatever emotions you want there.
Yeah.
But I do think that there is room for another character to be involved, to have a hand in the authorship of the letter. Somebody who feels wronged by Jon in these exact same ways. And I think the person who fits that profile is Sir Alistair Thorne.
Yeah, that's another part of the letter that I think is really interesting. This seems like somebody that knows enough about Jon that they know enough to piss him off. Like, they're picking things in particular that would make him angry.
So now that we're in the crazy portion, what kind of evidence is there that Alistair Thorne is down in Winterfell? I'm just going to tell you, there's none. There's absolutely none. Don't bother looking. I've looked. There's none. So where is Alistair? Last we saw him, it was about midway through the last book, where Jon had converted him from a steward into a ranger and had sent him off with 2 people north of the wall on a ranging mission. And he was gone north beyond the wall, and he has since vanished from the story.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean he's down in Winterfell? No, not at all. However, I do feel that it is particularly peculiar for George's invisible hand of the author to take Jon's primary antagonist from the past 5 books and write him away from the wall, out into the middle of nowhere, where he has no impact in the story when Jon finally has his downfall. I struggle exactly to see what his narrative purpose is remaining for the story, and why George chose to do that at this moment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And while you might think it's a little stupid of me to suggest that somebody in a ranging party of 3 north of the wall goes missing and one of those characters ends up all the way down in Winterfell after a couple of months, that is the entire plot of the first 2 chapters in the entire series. When Will, Garrett, and Waymar Royce go off north of the wall, they get ambushed, one of them flees and deserts, and they find themselves all the way down in Winterfell.
Wonderful.
So Thorne, maybe the most unlikely candidate, but I think it fits the tone, and I think it would be an interesting way for Alistair to get involved back down in the story. There you go, Thorne.
Interesting. You know, when you first said it, it sounded crazy, but you made it sound more plausible than I expected.
Nice job, Aaron.
Yeah. Well. Yeah.
Wait, can I ask a question, Aaron? What is your idea of Alistair Thorne's motive? If it were Alistair Thorne, what would be his motive for writing this letter? What does he hope Jon does?
I think it's just that he does something stupid and ends up getting himself killed.
But are you saying that he hopes that Jon will try and storm on Winterfell and then...
Maybe. I think it's more that he knows that Jon would end up betraying his vows because of the letter and would end up doing exactly what happened. Like, he tries to rally a cause and it ends up... And Thorne knows that people up at the wall would not let this kind of thing stand.
So you think that he would read it aloud? So you think that Alistair Thorne thinks that Jon would read it aloud?
Well, not necessarily, but Jon's going to have to share it in some way if he's going to form an army in order to go down to Winterfell. I mean, he has to leave Castle Black if he's going to go down to Winterfell, and the people in Night's Watch are going to know if he's leaving. Even if he left, like, without people knowing with an entire army, it's possible that he would get killed down at Winterfell, or at least it gets him away from the wall.
Mm.
And, like, he's the one who knows Jon. He's the one who knows what would affect...
Right, I mean, he knows how to bait him.
Yeah.
Sure.
But yeah.
Does Thorne know that Mance is in Winterfell?
Well, that's the thing, as far as motive is concerned. Like, if he was down there and discovered Mance Rayder is still alive, like, he would be so far beyond himself that he would be so angry with Jon that he would actually try and get him killed. Because, like, remember, like, his last chapter when he's talking with Jon Snow, he accuses Jon of sending him off beyond the wall as a ranger to send him off to die. Like, he is so angry with Jon in that last chapter. And he does like tell him, you're not going to get away with this. I'm coming back, Snow.
Mance wasn't wearing a glamour or anything, right? He was just walking around as himself.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's just Abel.
Mm-hmm.
Ableton. That's why.
I mean, that's another thing. George decided to take Mance's glamour off, which leaves open the possibility that somebody can identify him, because like Mance and the Spearwives, they're some of the hardest people in the story. So it's also possible that they might not crack under torture and they didn't reveal themselves. Thorn is somebody who could identify them.
It's interesting. So I like the motivation for that, just because it's like, this is a letter to goad Jon, and this is exactly what Alistair would want. Maybe there was a second letter sent that went to Bowen Marsh being like, by the way, get ready. Jon's about to do something dumb. Or they worked it out.
I mean, also, you guys were talking about like why the letter doesn't say that much about Arya, why it doesn't mention her by name. Well, from Thorne's worldview, the big lie that he's never been able to prove is that Jon is still a wildling. Like, he's always been a wildling. So for Jon to side with them would be for him to forsake his entire family. Mance here is the primary one who matters. He's the one who gets named in the letter. I mean, even if Thorne didn't write the letter or have any part in it, he still believes that Mance and Jon are like buddies. Jon is in bed with Big Wildling. And so, like, you've also got the stuff in here, like the one issue people take with the letter is the heads upon the walls of Winterfell. Like, that's supposed to be a southern thing. The Boltons flay people, so why exactly in this letter? Well, if you're looking for an explanation, Thorne is from the Crownlands, so...
I would also believe, though, that Ramsay is capable of putting heads on walls entirely. Yeah, like, just because he likes doing weird stuff with people's bodies. I mean, like... But given that, you know, we're looking at the authorship very carefully and all the words and all that, that's... Yeah, it's an open thing. I mean, I think the big open question here is what you touched on, which is why does this letter care about Mance so much, and like the wildling princess and all that, like why is that in there as much as it is, if it's really just Ramsay bragging that he killed Stannis?
If it's really just Ramsay, then it would work because it exposed Jon for his lies, that he's breaking his vows by taking part in the realms of men. And this may be a letter not for Jon, but maybe for the Night's Watch, to be like, hey guys, look, your Lord Commander's messing around with the rest of the North and he's not supposed to. Maybe trying to build support up there, which, if he's talked to the Spearwives and Mance, then he would know that the Night's Watch is divided.
That's true, yeah.
The Reek thing doesn't make much sense if it's not Ramsay, though. Everyone else...
Well, it has to come from somebody who knows that he calls him Reek, and Barbary Dustin knows that, and so does, I guess,
she does.
Theon said everything to Asha in the sample chapter, which then opens up the floodgates for that entire party to like potentially be involved. But to me, the thing that sticks out about the letter itself is that this is a chapter that was pushed forward in the narrative, like we talked in last cast, where some of the ambiguity of it is created by the fact that it comes chronologically desynced with the rest of the book. And because of that, a lot more people seem plausible than probably they will be as they become eliminated in the course of the Northern narrative within the first couple 100 pages or so of the next book.
Right, that's true. If Stannis, for example, just like dies, you know, if everything happens, and I'm not saying it will, but like if everything happens in the book the way that the letter said it did, then we can kind of go, oh, well, okay, all right, I guess it was Ramsay after all, but...
The one motivation that's never really worked for me is that people send this letter up to Jon to get him to come down to Winterfell and actually assist Stannis.
That one, I don't get that.
In a Game of Thrones, Jon and their small party made it up to the wall, and it took them an entire month. We're talking about the North right now in the cold, and it's snowing heavily, just a little bit up at the wall, but heavily around Winterfell. To travel with that with a huge army in the dead of winter would be at least 2, maybe 3 months to get down there, and Stannis's provisions are already completely depleted. So there's no way for Jon to actually assist Stannis if that was like the motivation, just because of like physical limitations. He can't teleport.
That's true.
One thing that I will say is that I mean, I'm from the perspective that it was Ramsay. Logistically, the whole thing about getting between the wall and Winterfell and how long it would take, this letter is written from someone who is not leaving Winterfell.
Yeah.
Someone who is not marching to the wall, but rather someone who is like,
come and see.
Send them back to me, or else I will come to the wall. Keep them from me, and I will cut out your bastard's heart. But it's not a declaration of war like, hey, I'm coming. I have left, and by the time you get this letter, I'm on my way. It's I mean, I think that lends itself to what you were saying about the logistics of it. It's not easy to get between the wall and Winterfell. The letter kind of acknowledges that.
It's the same distance in the real world between like Paris and Berlin, like to the mile. It's really far. Like you're not traveling that distance in the medieval era in like a week.
Yeah, it's trying to accomplish these goals without having to march one person all the way up or down or whatever. It's just sending a raven.
That's true. And if Jon actually comes south, let's say he even has a few thousand wildlings with him. Well, if you know he's coming, we've heard that the Boltons have spies all along the road from Winterfell to the Watch. So they would see him coming and they could do an easy ambush and just wipe him out. It works perfectly strategically if you're trying to get them.
20 good men.
Well, maybe 21 good men, but that's a strategy that would work very well. Whereas if it's coming from anyone in Stannis' camp, the only reason you're writing this letter is you hope that they'll meet you at Winterfell. But they're so close, why would you even wait? Let's say Stannis wins the Battle of Ice, right? He writes this letter, and he's hoping they'll come and they'll pincer Winterfell and take it over. I don't think you can wait in this weather. I mean, we've been told over and over and over again, they're out of food. The blizzard's piling up. They're losing men constantly. You can't wait. That'd be a stupid idea for Stannis to do. And honestly, I think Stannis is smarter than that, as much as I don't like him.
Well, so I mean, talking about motive here, and let's just, let's humor me here. Let's say Stannis wrote it. Okay. What would be his motive? And would it be for Jon to come south and meet him and, they can fight the battle together and like that's why? Maybe. But the letter specifically says that, Stannis is dead. And this comes at a time when Stannis is kind of contemplating his own morality before he's supposed to, enter this very dangerous phase of this war. And he's making arrangements with like sending Justin Massey over to Braavos and saying, you may hear that I'm dead. It may even be true. So he's contemplating his morality. He's trying to make arrangements for this battle, this war to continue after he dies. And we know, sadly, from the show that Shireen is going to be burned. I don't know what level Stannis knows that that's going to happen, but Stannis will need an heir. And Stannis' conception of power and the way he kind of sees himself in his own narrative as this guy who, power was thrust on him, he didn't want it. And so for Stannis to look around and say, who's most like me, who's most deserving of being named my heir, I think it would be Jon Snow. And I think it would make sense for Stannis to try and kind of test him and see what would Jon do if he thought that I was dead. Would he keep the battle going?
I can see that actually because, Stannis' goal, we were talking about this earlier with the Theon thing. That's why it was such a good segue post, about how he wanted Jon to abandon his vows and become Lord of Winterfell. And if Stannis sends the letter, then he is presenting Jon with this choice. He's laying Jon's choices out for him. He's saying, look, you've already committed Mance Rayder and this secret mission and all that to rescuing Arya. You're already embroiled in this political conflict. Commit all the way, just do it, just come south. And maybe Stannis has taken Winterfell at this point and is just literally trying to goad Jon into finally hitting that snapping point and finally breaking his vows. And then when he comes south, Stannis can go, oh, hey, what's up? You want to be king in the north? You want to be Lord of Winterfell?
I'm Parmesan, Coach.
Stannis.
Hey, how you doing? How you doing?
You did it again. Well, if that's true, though, would Jon really come down to Winterfell, though, by himself in this situation? Like, would Jon physically walk into Winterfell alone to go see Ramsay to come down there and Stannis would be like, yo, sup? I took the whole castle. You're supposed to be my my new heir. How you doing?
Holla.
And Jon's like, what the hell, man?
I mean,
I thought my sister was dead. Was gonna be like, what? Why would he would have to bring an army? Like,
he'd have to bring the wildlings.
So he brings the whole army down there, and then there's no one to fight. Probably a lot of them would die along the way. I don't know if Stannis would really care about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, what happened to the Stannis who was so concerned with the defense of the wall that he was going to take all the castles away from Jon in order to have them manned and defending against the others? Like, they're totally undefended now. Just see Jon not being in a good position to join Stannis if he was tricked into coming down there. That's not a good way to win loyalty. It's like, yo, you don't have anywhere to go now. You abandon your vows.
Yeah, right, right.
I mean, Stannis doesn't know how the best ways to get people to pledge loyalty. That's why he is who he is.
True.
He's trying some different. He's trying out some different things these days.
Wild card.
And I will say that, like, I agree with that, because you would think that if it was Stannis really trying to bait Jon that much, that there would be more of an emphasis on Arya, like we were saying.
Yeah.
Since Arya's his whole thing.
It's such an easy button to push.
Right, yeah. So, but the letter presents Arya as missing, not as dead, not as, aha, I got her back.
And doesn't even name her. It doesn't say your sister or Arya Stark. It's just like my bride.
So it's, if Stannis was trying to, I can't remember how much Stannis knows about Jon's feelings. I just get the feeling that Stannis would go for pushing that button as opposed to the whole Stannis. Although maybe Stannis is so self-absorbed that he would just go with the Stannis is dead is a good enough motivation to get anyone to come running.
Finally, he's dead.
Okay. I'm gonna throw this out there because it's like a tangential, I think, suspect to Stannis. Asha.
Yeah.
I think Asha is interesting, but I have the same problem with her writing this that I do with Theon or Stannis, that there's no reason for them to mention Theon at all in this letter. If they're sending it to Jon, they know they have Theon. Jon doesn't know who Reek is. Yeah. So that's right. That's just like a swing and a miss on a reference. Whereas somebody that's within Winterfell, like Barbary or Mance or Ramsay himself, or maybe Roose, who knows, maybe Roose wrote this, but the inclusion of Reek missing, I think, signals somebody that doesn't know where he is currently. So that's why they're sending it out.
Yeah.
And I think Ramsay's the only one that would really want Theon sent back. I think it's a real key to it. It's the rest of it you can argue about, but I have a hard time seeing why anyone else would mention Reek to Jon and then want him back.
So there's a comment in this discussion thread by Decapod 2005. And what this user says is, more info, I would systemize the possible theories a little differently, and they give 3 possibilities. The author of the pink letter is Ramsay, and everything in it is basically true. The author is Ramsay, and basically everything in it is a lie. The author is someone else. So they say that the problem with the first possibility is that, like, it's hard for them to imagine that Ramsay would win the Battle of Ice and not have Theon and Jane afterwards. I mean, they're in the middle of winter, like, how hard is it to find a cripple and a traumatized girl, as they said? That's what they said. That's their wording. Right. And the third option, they say they don't see it very convincing because of, like, the problematic motives of the writers. And they also feel that Martin didn't give any foreshadowing. But of course, that could be a symptom of this chapter being pushed forward, since I guess Martin might have wanted to end on a cliffhanger, per his, like, history as a TV writer. And then they say that the most likely scenario to them is possibility 2, that Ramsay wrote it, but he's lying about having defeated Stannis already, and he wrote it after learning about Jon Snow's plot to free Arya. And they feel that this action is fitting of Ramsay. It's not because it's not a smart, calculated move by him, and more of, as they say, a psychopath's impulse reaction to having something that was taken away from him. And they actually felt it was, like, politically unwise. It's a worst-case scenario for him, as he would expect that Jon will lead his army to Winterfell, but perhaps Ramsay doesn't think like that.
I think that's a really good point, because if you look at it from the perspective of this letter, it's somebody that's completely self-absorbed. It's my bride, not your sister. it's my reek, not Theon. Everything's about Ramsay who's writing it. That would be like a sociopath's way of viewing the world.
Which also links up like this, like Decapod 2005 said that's why it emphasizes Mance so much, is because Mance is like the insult from Jon to Ramsay. That's how Jon has wronged Ramsay, is by sending this wildling, this rando,
he's a king,
to steal his bride. Like, you know,
it's
how
his bride.
Dare he? How dare he send this wildling and these spear wives? So yeah, I guess that's what I also see convincing about Ramsay as the author, is because it seems like a Ramsay reaction to someone messing with him is just to completely freak out and obsess over how he's been wronged and try to flip it on its head and get back at this other person, like he did with Theon in book 2.
Yeah.
I think he's a little too magically clever in book 2. I think book 5 sort of makes him a little less superhumanly master of disguise, Gene Parmigiani. But yeah, I mean, I think we see that same kind of, like, he's been wronged, he obsesses over that, and does anything he can to try and get recompense.
And the repetition of, like, the word bastard and calling Jon a bastard, then it would be going off the idea of, like, self-absorption. Ramsay thinking, oh, he has a chip on his shoulder from being born a bastard, and so he's just projecting that onto Jon, and continues to call him that because he thinks that it'll bother Jon as much as it ever bothered him.
Right, it's the worst insult he has.
It's also signed as Trueborn, Lord of Winterfell, so
Yeah.
it's meant to, like, yo, I am actually now Trueborn and you aren't.
Yeah. And taunting him with the title that he always, to an extent, wanted as a child. Like, because he thinks to himself that he used to fantasize that he would be Lord of Winterfell until he realized what him being a bastard actually meant for his station.
I think also one thing to talk about with this letter would be, let's say it is written by somebody else. Would this have, like, a big narrative impact for that to be revealed? Like, let's say Barbary wrote it, or let's say Stannis wrote it. Would it be anything other than just like, oh, neat? I think that's an important part of what if George actually faked this.
Right, like what's the development that comes as a result of the authorship being revealed, right? Because this is kind of similar to stuff we've talked about with Aegon Blackfyre before.
Yeah.
With the Blackfyre twist is only interesting if it's going to have interesting effects on the characters, like John Connington being completely broken by this twist or something. So if the authorship is not Ramsay, then that twist has to lead to further developments in the story. It can't just be a note that we get along the way, but nothing comes as a result of it. So yeah, there has to be a consequence.
If it is Lady Dustin, right, then the big narrative punch there is the revelation that there is this Grand Northern conspiracy that is, a bit more far-reaching than just, Wyman Manderley, right? And it's part of that big reveal that, like, there's this whole group within Winterfell that is working together in a coherent manner to take down the Boltons.
But this kind of brings up another problem with having it be written by one of the Grand Northern conspiracy people. Why does anybody need Jon? Like, they would know that Bran is alive. They know that Rickon is alive. They know that Arya is, they believe Arya is probably alive there too. Nobody in the conspiracy needs Jon, and from the line of succession, he's not the best option. It would make more sense to have Jon be their ally up at the wall.
So I think that there are some possibilities of how it could have narrative consequence if it's written by someone else. So one of the things that it seems like George R. R. Martin is playing with a lot, especially in these last 2 books, is that idea of irony. And let's say someone wrote this letter to Jon in the hopes that it would convince Jon to come down and lend his forces to their cause. But in fact, what happens is that they write the letter, Jon reads it aloud to everyone, and their letter, as opposed to bringing them help, has actually killed off an ally and barred them from getting any of the assistance that they were hoping for. And then that would lead to them failing in, like, X project or whatever. And, of course, there's all the other larger ramifications of what Jon's death could mean and his resurrection, especially as we see those consequences in, like, Beric Dondarrion with his, like, loss of humanity or loss of memory, etc. So those are some things that could impact the storyline.
That's true. Yeah, that's
from a narrative level.
That's true.
And from a character level. Like, I made this mistake. I got greedy. I tried to get the Lord Commander to come down, and I kicked myself in the ass by doing so.
To go back to the Thorn stuff for a second, I think that would add a bit more to the story, because when we look at the Boltons, we're meant to hate them, but Alistair would add maybe a bit more nuance there, because if you go back to the first book, what did Ned Stark, what did the Starks do when the raving madman came down from the wall and told his story? Ned instantly beheaded him and didn't want to listen to what he had to say.
Yeah.
If the Boltons run into the same thing, where Alistair is fleeing from beyond the wall with information, and the Boltons kind of take him in and listen to it, maybe they contemplate in aiding in this fight up against the wall, where Ned should have maybe done that from the beginning. And it adds, I think, an interesting variation on the story that we've already had, and makes the Boltons seem a bit less comically evil.
Yeah.
And going off of what Eliana said earlier about Jon's death being a tragedy, it works in this case too, because had Jon looked at the letter more closely, and Alistair was behind part of it, Jon would have going off Crusader Kings, a casus belli, a reason for war, as the Lord Commander, to go down there and bring the fugitive of the Night's Watch to justice, and he wouldn't even have had to betray his vows to begin with.
Sure, yeah. I mean, this is true, what Eliana, what you were saying too, about the narrative consequence of it being someone else, if they're trying to get Jon to come down and help them and it gets flipped on its head. But I feel like if that's, and this is just my opinion, if that's what George was going for, he would have just had the letter be, "We won the battle, Jon, come south and join us," and presenting him with that choice. Yeah, presenting him with the choice in that sort of positive sense of Jon, I have won the battle, I am naming you the Lord of Winterfell, come south, and Jon is presented with it that way. And it leads to his death in that way.
Oh, yeah, that'd be really good.
That there's not necessarily a need then for it to be this fake letter.
Yeah, that's a less complicated way for George to have structured it, if that was his intention the entire time.
I mean, maybe, here's another idea. He didn't know who it was going to be.
That's possible. That's entirely possible.
The Undying.
And it was ambiguous, and he's just like, I'll figure that out later when I release this book next year, Keep it open and then decide later who the author was.
That's true. Yeah, having that sort of open-endedness means that he didn't have to decide before he published Dance with Dragons, and then could toy with the battle chapters even more. Like Anne Grohl said, if she hadn't made him stop writing, he would have been working on those battles for another year at least, right? So maybe part of that would be toying with, okay, who's the author of the pink letter? Who's done this?
I see what you're saying, but I think the inclusion of Theon in the letter eliminates about half of them. So if you leave out Rika's as a demand, then your possibilities are wide open. It could be anybody. But I think by eliminating Stannis and Theon and Asha in that way, that he's not really leaving it open. Maybe he's leaving it open in terms of somebody within Winterfell, but it's not a true House of the Undying moment where he's like, I can do anything with this. He's limited it a little bit. If you wanted to do it that way, then don't reveal that Stannis has found Theon.
Yeah. I don't really feel like the pink letter is open-ended, but I kind of feel that way about the Hooded Man.
Yeah.
Theon, in his chapters, runs into this guy in Winterfell who just meets him in the snow. Here's this guy, and he wears a hood. That's it. That's his total description. So maybe I could see him being an open character that is a plug for George later on.
I also just wanted to bring up real quick the best tinfoil from the pink letter thread. It's from user Jim GBR.
This is good stuff. Yeah.
Jim Gibber. I'm just going to read it. OP forgot to include another totally possible author, if it is totally possible, by the way. What if Bloodraven wrote the letter? Listen.
Hey!
We know that Bran and Bloodraven are watching Stannis and Theon through Warged Ravens. They are likely watching Jon Snow and maybe the events at Winterfell too. Mm-hmm. Perhaps Bran and Bloodraven crafted the letter in their cave. Cold Hand scavenged the link in parchment. Mira wrote the letter. Bran sent it to the wall via Warged Raven. The motivation, I don't know. That's just amazing comic timing right there. Bloodraven isn't playing a Game of Thrones. He's next level. It's too early in our story to guess his endgame. Whatever he's scheming, he needed Jon Snow to forsake his vows, get killed either by the Night's Watch or the Boltons, and rise again as Aegon Targaryen, free from his duty to the Watch. Now, this is next level crazy, but also incredibly fun.
Oh, it's so fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
I really like the detail that went into it, though. Like, cold hand, they thought it through.
Yeah,
They're like, okay, where do they get the parchment? Oh, Cold Hands obviously scavenged that. Mira wrote it. She's got good handwriting. But then couldn't come up with a motivation.
Yeah, I mean, they backed down from it pretty quickly when fellow mod Walda was like...
They did.
Well,
but it's a real good one.
Did they back down, or did they just ascribe it to Bloodraven being next level?
No, they backed down because, like, Walda was like, they believe Bloodraven's keeping Jon and Thorne. They're like, yeah, I think you're right. And then they were like, I wrote my comment mostly tongue-in-cheek.
Oh, you're right. Okay, yeah.
But it's still amazing.
My bad.
It
is amazing.
Still amazing.
Bloodraven's 4-dimensional Savas.
I mean, but actually, literally,
he's up to 5D.
Well, I mean, literally, to an extent, if you consider time the fourth dimension, yes.
Oh my god! Whoa! I think what's actually happening in this thing is that Jem Gerber is describing Gurm. Basically, it's like this whole situation was crafted to have a way for Jon to die, and he's like, "Well, it must be Bloodraven." It's like, no. You're seeing the author.
Yeah,
he wants
right.
He wants Jon to die, so he manufactured a way for it to happen.
This is very much like in talking with fellow moderator Mighty Isabel about Star Wars recently. She has pointed out to us that you can substitute the plot for the Force, and the movies make just as much sense.
Yes, they do.
So I mean, yeah, in that sense, yeah, the letter was written by George R.R. Martin. He's the one
in order to kill
What
Jon.
who wanted to kill Jon.
We've solved
What
it.
if all of us are written by George R. R. Martin?
Oh,
My life doesn't have that much tragedy.
That's true.
I feel like my nipples would be more responsive if I were written
Damn,
by
dude.
George R.R. Martin.
I mean, my name sounds like it could be a character from this series.
It does.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
Liana, Eliana,
Yeah. Yeah.
like electronic Liana. Yeah.
I found a poll that I conducted, I think it was before I was a mod. It was 2 years ago. August 2015.
Oh, yeah.
Which is shortly after Alex's post, and it was who wrote the pink letter. And 40% of the sub voted that it was Mance Raider.
Wow.
Yeah, we kind of overlooked that one.
Just briefly, the problem with Mance, ignoring the stuff in the text for a minute, we start the story and Mance is Jon's enemy, and then Jon meets Mance and they become friends, and then Jon goes back to the Night's Watch and they become enemies again. Then Jon goes out to treat with him and then they become friends, and then Mance gets sent down to Winterfell, and now it says like, oh, now they're going to be enemies again. Like at some point it gets too silly. Indiana Jones Kingdom of the Crystal Skull 4, like that one guy who just keeps flipping sides back and forth, like it gets a bit silly. And Mance has gotten everything in the world that he's ever wanted from Jon so far. Like, the motivation is just like jumping through hoops to get to that point.
Yeah.
Okay,
right.
back to the poll.
Right.
34% voted for Ramsay, 11% for Stannis, 6% for Barbary Dustin.
Way to go, Alex.
All right.
6%.
I'm going to go back to this one because it has 63 votes at 3%, but I'll save it for last because it's my favorite. Theon Greyjoy has 31 votes at 2%. Melisandre at 1%. Roose Bolton at 1%. Asha at 1%. Tormund at 7 votes.
Tormund?
Val received 2 votes. But my favorite answer that got 63 votes was Jon Snow.
John Durden?
Jon Snow wrote the pink letter to himself in order to get out of the Night's Watch vows.
That's amazing.
His crafty plot tricked even his internal point of view, failed, and got himself killed.
That is amazing.
This is like the Cersei Durden theory that she poisoned Joffrey on her own.
Whoa, wait.
You ever heard that one?
All right, we need to do a whole episode devoted to theories that are just someone doing something to themselves. Like the Red Wedding was actually a plot by like Brynden Blackfish.
There's this old comment here from the Jack Froster who says, I had to chuckle at Jon Snow being the author. Guys, look at this letter that just arrived. Totally not my handwriting. Oh, look. It gives me a reason to leave this hole. Bye, everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I take it. Yeah, I see it.
Well, luckily, since that poll, since I just conducted a new one, the majority of the sub does believe that it was simply Ramsay. So
It's funny that you say that, actually, because in this very discussion thread, 16 days ago as of today, the top comment is from Wild 2098, and they did their own, it's not really a poll, but they sort of listed some of the top comments from the thread and their takes on it. And I think most of them are either Mance or Stannis.
Well, I'm agnostic, but yeah.
That's true. Your name is in there, but you should be really listed as agnostic. But there's only Brynden B. Fish is listed as thinking Ramsay could be the author. There's like 9 other folks on that list.
Well,
And it's all Mance, Stannis. There is a Barbary Mance option on there.
it was written earlier in the thread too, because like I know Dan Roberta comes in later and says Ramsay.
I'm not on there, and I got one of the top comments too. So
yeah, how dare they?
Yeah.
Oh, how dare they?
Bragging.
I think if you're going off top comments, a lot of them are going to gravitate towards the most creative, maybe than like the simpler answer, which is why that thread became a bit more oriented towards the tinfoil.
I think the pink letter can sort of be like a meta thing about the fandom's navel gazing sometimes. Or it's just like, it's the null hypothesis is just that it's Ramsay, and we've just gone so far since A Dance with Dragons just because like we're mining for tinfoil at this point.
Yeah. Well, we did a linguistic analysis.
Yes, you did.
Yeah. We need to talk about your comment.
Please talk about that.
Yeah.
Eliana, can you please talk about your linguistic analysis?
Your comment in this thread.
The conclusion was that George R. Martin wrote this letter.
No, that's it.
Yeah.
That was it, huh? Yeah, okay. All right.
From a linguistic perspective, we have, I think, like 3 lines that Asha remembers Ramsay wrote to her in A Dance with Dragons. What were the 3 lines? I gotta find them. Did you bring them up in your post?
Something. No, someone else brought them up. They're quoted here. Oh, here we go. I write this letter in the blood of Ironman. I send you each a piece of prince. Linger in my lands and share his fate. So there's like some similarities. So
it's relatively low diction.
The similarities would be like, I guess, in the composition of the sentences. They're fairly like simple construction. By simple, I mean simple versus complex sentences. It's just like subject, verb, and then like an object, etc. And it's like, I write X, and like the pink letter, a lot of it begins, I do X. Every now and then you have like a clause like introducing everything, whatevs. And then linger in my lands and share his fate. Like the construction of that is a little similar to towards the end of the pink letter, where Ramsay's like, do this or this. Or like, do this and this.
The ultimatum.
Yeah. The imperative, like, sort of voice.
Yeah. There's also, I mean, the framing of it is all Ramsay oriented. It's his lands. He's sending them a piece of prince. So that's similar to the pink letter for sure, because it's all my bride.
Yeah.
I want possessive Ramsay oriented things.
Alex, what did you want to go ahead.
Yeah, so I did a whole computational analysis of the pink letter, and I built a custom lexer for the series, and ripped out all the text from books 1 through 5 and the sample chapters and everything. And never published any results for anything like that, because it was bunk. Like, there's nothing there, right? Like, there's no worthwhile findings there. Nothing conclusive at all. Try to see if there were certain patterns or like distances between words that kind of matched the speech of other people, and there's nothing.
That's why my joke, like when I started it, like was, it's written by George R. Martin. The thing is, like, whatever you find, it's going to still be in the voice, technically, of one person. Like, the pink letter is written by George R. Martin. There's no, like, real Ramsay that we can use to, like, compare, like, actual, like, things. That's the catch. Like, it's all artifice. And so, yeah, obviously the flaw in using this, like, and that's why, perhaps, like, you went through all of that effort and like found nothing, because there is a conclusion Again, it's all George R. R. Martin wrote all the things. Right. So
yeah,
and Grohl maybe.
Well, before we finish up, I just had one question I wanted to go around and just sort of like on a scale 1 to 10, with the scale being how important do you think this is? 10 being the most, 1 being the least. What would you rank the Pink Letter mystery in terms of the narrative and what will happen with Winds of Winter? Do you think it will have no impact? Do you think it's like a huge deal?
Well, that's a good question. That's a great question.
I can only answer how important it is to me. It's not higher than 5.
Eliana?
Well, okay. Yeah, I mean...
It's not higher. 3?
So 5 for Eliana. Okay, 3.
I would honestly say a 3 or a 2.
Okay.
I know I've said that I'm like an orthodox on this, and I love talking about the theories and all that. I think it's so fun. But I also think that given the sheer amount of stuff that's happening in the Winds of Winter, I just don't necessarily see this specific mystery as requiring all that much narrative space to be resolved.
Okay.
When there's a lot of other stuff in the North that I think has been built up more as being more mysterious and needing more resolution. Whatever Wyman's up to, whatever Barbary is up to, really. And maybe the Pink Letter's part of that. Maybe it is. But my gut is that the Pink Letter is mostly what it appears to be on its face. That there are other mysteries about like how the contents got to be what they are, but that really the Pink Letter itself, the authorship, isn't going to be a big George R. R. Martin twist.
I think from our current perspective, when we look at it, we think like this is all that we have to speculate on about the next book, so we don't have it. But I think in retrospect, after reading The Winds of Winter, most of us are going to look back and get more enjoyment out of the other stuff in the North, in just the North itself, rather than the revelation of did Ramsay or not write the Pink Letter. Like, I'm much more probably going to be thrilled to read the stories of Jon's chapters as like he rediscovers himself and what happens with the resolution in the North after Stannis is gone, or all that stuff, and the rest of the book as well. I would probably say I give it a like more of like a coconut on our scale.
See, so like a 4 or 5.
Okay. All right.
What about you, Alex?
I'm higher. I want to say more like a 7.
Ooh, that's pretty high. That's like a banana.
Sure.
Yeah, it's like a banana.
It's not like a central mystery, right? But I do think there's enough going on kind of at the periphery of the Pink Letter, potentially. If, Lady Dustin is involved in some way, or if it's Stannis, I think that has the potential to start weaving together some other plots that are not kind of connected right now. And if it is, as I think it is, sort of a test to see if Jon is worthy of becoming Stannis' heir. If it is that case, then I think that probably gets into the end game of the series. And I mean, we have Jon being Robb's heir, Jon being Daenerys' heir, Jon being potentially, if the Sansa Ashford attorney thing is correct, and Sansa marries Aegon, he could potentially be legally Aegon's heir.
Technically, the Ashford tourney doesn't speculate who Sansa will marry.
That's true. That's true.
So you're saying Jon's very airy?
Well, no, I'm saying if
because he's full of
holes. The
holes.
end game of the series here is how is Westeros going to heal from all of these wounds of this war politically? They need a unifying leader, and in my mind, the end game is it has to be somebody through a series of contrived things ends up being the heir to basically everybody else who dies off. And that this would be an important piece in that puzzle of Jon becoming Stannis' heir.
Oh, yeah.
Which also obviously requires Shireen to die. So, but it's, I said, tying together all of these different things. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. You make a good case.
Yeah, like sort of as a linchpin of a lot of different... it's a spoke on which or a hub on
the
which
northern
spokes connect.
Jon is the Myronese knot.
Okay, I have an interesting. Well, I have a variable answer to this. If it's Ramsay, I don't think it matters that much. If it's somebody else, then I think it becomes more important.
Sure,
it's dependent entirely on how develop the conspiracy behind it is. Like if it's Aaron's idea and it's Alistair Thorne, that it becomes huge because then it shows like the Night's Watch is working against Jon, and it's like there could be a civil war there. But if it's not, if it's just like the null hypothesis, then it's like a 2. So I would say if it's Ramsay, it's like a 1 or a 2. It can go up to like a 7 or an 8, depending on how crazy the conspiracy gets.
Sure. Yeah, I can see that. That's sort of a cop-out, but you're the one who asked the question, so it's okay.
I copped out in that I didn't answer actually Matt's question. I just answered how much I cared.
Yeah.
That's fair, yeah. I think that about wraps it up for our extended pink letter discussion. I mean, we've covered a lot of theories, including some far out ones, some ones that are far beyond the wall, even.
It's like a pink manuscript.
My favorites have to be the ones that are in Castle Black, right? If it's like Tormund or like Melisandre, I can just
or John.
No, my favorite is John. I would have voted John.
Yeah, like the letter is coming from inside the castle.
It's coming from inside that brain.
We've traced the letter.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, we didn't really talk about Mel, did we? Oh, that's too bad. As always, we want to thank all of you for listening to Maester Monthly. We want to thank George R. R. Martin for writing the books, Song of Ice and Fire. We want to thank also the users of the subreddit for writing such great stuff. We always have a lot to talk about on Maester Monthly, and that's entirely due to you all. You can find Maester Monthly on Twitter, @Maester Monthly. You can find us on YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher. Be sure to check out the YouTube version, even if you listen to it elsewhere, because Aaron always puts in a ton of work making incredible video effects for our podcast.
You can also find me in other things where I am drunk, as I do, but not today. Today, I am wired on coffee. So you can find me eventually, Drunk ASOIF History, so that's drunk space ASOIAF space history, is doing a reread of the Duncan Egg series called Drunk and Egg. If you like jokes about people being thick as a castle wall with 2 C's, tune into that. I'm doing that with Queen of Love and Booty on Twitter, and we are covering the Hedge Knight.
And you can also find me. I was recently on the Watchers on the Wall yearly awards for Game of Thrones. So there's a whole video for that you can check out. And obviously writing on Watchers on the Wall itself. And I'll soon be coming out with probably a nice post about Weirwoods that would be fun to check out.
I think that about does it for us. I have been Michael, also known as Bookshelf Stud.
I have been Eliana, also known as Glass Table Girl.
I've been Matt, also known as Joe Magician.
I'm Aaron, Admiral Kurd.
I've been Alex, aka Sir Dunk the Lunk.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Smash that MF and like button.
Yeah, don't forget to follow us on Twitter. Don't forget to smash that like button. And you will hear us next time.
Oh, like us on Facebook.
Wait, I almost forgot. You can also find us on Facebook at Maester Monthly, of course, where we'll be posting
nothing.
Social media posts.
We'll be posting
I
I don't know.
I don't know what we'll be
We're
posting.
figuring it out. We're figuring it out.
You can also
guys.
find us on Facebook at Maester Monthly. You can email us at maestermonthly@gmail.com. Add us to like Domino's promotional deals.
You can find us on the subreddit. Message the moderators.
We will ignore it.
If you use a swear word on the
don't do
subreddit,
that.
we will ban you. So that's
Don't at me, bro.
all right. Use any combination of those you want, Aaron. Do we have enough outro material? Are we good?